George Harris's heart pounds as he crouches behind a massive stone pillar in the Aridian Monastery. The sacred milking season has begun, and he's trapped in the middle of it. Alarms blare through the ancient halls, echoing off the cold stone walls. George's breath comes in short gasps as he strains to hear the approaching footsteps of his pursuers. He hadn't planned on becoming an intruder when he arrived on Aridia 4 to study the alien culture. Now he's witnessing a highly secretive ritual that could cost him his life. The monastery looms around him, a colossal structure nestled in the jagged mountains of the alien world. It serves a dual purpose, a spiritual center for the Aridians and a production facility for their coveted ambrosia. This substance, extracted from the monks' bodies during the milking season, is the reason for George's current predicament. A towering figure rounds the corner, and George presses himself flat against the pillar. Elder Zax, the head monk, storms past, his iridescent purple skin shimmering in the dim light. George overhears him barking orders to his subordinates. Find the human intruder. He must be executed immediately to preserve the sanctity of our traditions. George's mind races. He needs to escape, but the monastery is a labyrinth of winding corridors and sealed chambers. As he contemplates his next move, a slender hand grabs his arm. He whirls around, ready to defend himself, but stops short. Before him stands Petra, a young Aridian acolyte. Her silver eyes lock onto his, conveying a mix of fear and determination. "Follow me," she whispers, tugging him towards a hidden passageway. As they navigate the secret corridors, Petra explains in hushed tones. The milking process is painful, potentially fatal for many monks, but challenging tradition is forbidden. Her words send a chill down George's spine. They duck into a storage chamber filled with vats of glowing liquid. The ambrosia. George's scientific mind kicks into overdrive. This substance could be the key to solving Earth's ongoing energy crisis. It's a powerful aphrodisiac and energy source, highly valued across the galaxy. Suddenly, voices drift through the chamber. George and Petra crouch behind the vats, listening intently. It's Elder Zax, speaking to someone via a communication device. "Yes, the ambrosia production is on schedule. We'll have enough to trade for the weapons you promised. With them, we'll conquer the neighboring star systems." George's blood runs cold. The Aridians pose a significant threat to human colonies in nearby systems. He needs to warn Earth, but doing so means interfering with Aridian culture and risking interstellar conflict. As George processes this information, he becomes acutely aware of Petra's presence beside him. Despite the danger, he feels a growing attraction to the young acolyte. Her bravery in helping him, an alien, speaks volumes about her character. Now, trapped in the heart of the Aridian monastery during their sacred milking season, George faces an impossible dilemma. He must find a way to escape, warn Earth of the impending threat, and navigate the complex ethical implications of his actions, all while grappling with his feelings for Petra and the knowledge that his decisions could reshape the future of both their species. The alarms continue to blare. Time is running out. George takes a deep breath, steeling himself for what's to come. He's no longer just an anthropologist studying an alien culture. He's become a pivotal player in a cosmic game of survival, diplomacy, and moral choices. And the next move is his. George's mind raced as he processed the implications of Elder Zax's words. The threat to human colonies was real, and he knew he had to act. Petra squeezed his hand, pulling him from his thoughts. "We need to move," she whispered urgently. "They'll search here soon." Nodding, George followed her lead. They crept between the vats of glowing ambrosia, their footsteps muffled by the hum of machinery. As they reached the far end of the chamber, Petra pressed her hand against a seemingly solid wall. A hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. "This way," she said, guiding him into the secret corridor. As they hurried through the dim passage, George's mind whirled with possibilities. "Petra, we need to stop them. Not just escape, but prevent this weapons deal." Petra's silver eyes widened. That's impossible. The elders, "I know it's dangerous," George interrupted, "but think about what's at stake. Your people, my people. We need to act. Petra hesitated, then nodded resolutely. You're right. We'll need to sabotage the ambrosia production. I know where the main facility is. They emerged from the hidden passage into a wider corridor. Petra led the way, her steps sure and swift. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with a young female Aridian, struggling under the weight of a large container. George instinctively reached out to steady her. Here, let me help. His hands made contact with the container, and suddenly, liquid seeped through a crack onto his skin. A jolt of energy surged through him, his senses sharpening instantly. The world seemed to come into vivid focus, colors brighter, sounds clearer. And with it came an overwhelming wave of attraction, not just to Petra, but to the Aridian before him as well. I'm Vex, the young acolyte stammered, her eyes wide with surprise and curiosity. You're the human they're searching for. George nodded, trying to focus through the rush of sensations. I'm George. This is Petra. We're trying to stop Elder Zax's weapons deal. Vex's expression shifted from fear to willpower. I want to help. The milking, it's wrong. I've always thought so, but I've been too afraid to speak up. Petra looked between them, her gaze lingering on George. We need to disable the communication systems. It's the only way to stop Zax from contacting the weapons dealers. I know where the control room is, Vex offered. I can guide you there. As they made their way through the winding corridors of the monastery, they overheard a group of senior monks in heated discussion. The vault must remain sealed, one voice insisted. If word of the ancient technology got out, George exchanged a glance with Petra and Vex. This could be the key to everything. We need to split up, George decided. Petra, Vex, can you handle the communications? The two nodded, and George felt a pang of concern as they disappeared down a side passage. He pushed aside the feeling, focusing on the task at hand. He needed to find that vault. As he searched, a large hand clamped down on his shoulder. George spun, ready to defend himself, only to find himself face to face with an imposing Aridian monk. Deep blue skin stretched over a muscular frame, intricate tattoos swirling across his exposed arms. I am Monk Kral, the Aridian rumbled, and you, human, are in grave danger. George tensed, ready to flee, but Kral's next word stopped him. I know of Zax's plan. I oppose it. Help me expose his corruption, and I will guide you to the vault. Hope surged in George's chest. Lead the way. As they navigated the labyrinthine monastery, alarms suddenly blared to life. Kral cursed under his breath. They've discovered the sabotage. We must hurry. They reached a nondescript wall, and Kral pressed a series of hidden panels. A doorway materialized, revealing a small chamber. Inside, a pedestal stood empty. The key, Kral growled. Zax must have it with him. George's mind raced, the effects of the ambrosia still coursing through him. He could feel the pieces falling into place. We need to confront Zax directly. Kral nodded grimly. It will be dangerous. Are you prepared, human? George thought of Petra and Vex, of the threat to both their peoples, of the suffering caused by the milking. The ambrosia heightened his senses, sharpened his commitment. He met Kral's gaze steadily. I'm ready. Let's end this. As they set off to confront Elder Zax, George's heart pounded with anticipation and fear. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and he knew the coming confrontation would change everything. The effects of the ambrosia surged through him, a constant reminder of the strange new world he'd stumbled into and the connections he'd forged. With Kral at his side, George steeled himself for what lay ahead. The true test was yet to come. George and Kral moved swiftly through the monastery's corridors, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone walls. The alarms continued to blare, creating a cacophony that set George's nerves on edge. As they rounded a corner, George's eyes widened at the sight of a group of Aridian guards rushing towards them. This way, Kral growled, pulling George into a narrow alcove. The guards passed by, oblivious to their presence. As the sound of footsteps faded, George turned to Kral. We need a way to get to Zax directly. Kral's eyes narrowed in thought. There is one way, but it's risky. We could allow ourselves to be captured. George nodded. the effects of the ambrosia sharpening his focus. It's our best chance. Let's do it. They stepped out into the corridor, deliberately making noise to attract attention. Within moments, they were surrounded by Aridian guards, their purple skins shimmering under the monastery's dim lights. "Intruders," one of the guards shouted. "Take them to Elder Zax." As they were roughly escorted through the winding passages, George caught glimpses of Petra and Vex slipping through the shadows, following at a distance. His heart raced, not just from the danger, but from the heightened attraction he felt towards them, amplified by the ambrosia coursing through his system. The guards brought them to a massive set of ornate doors, which swung open to reveal the grand chamber. George's breath caught in his throat as he took in the cavernous room, its walls adorned with ancient Aridian artifacts and glowing containers of ambrosia. At the far end of the chamber stood Elder Zax, his crimson skin a stark contrast to the cool stone surroundings, his golden eyes fixed on George with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "So, human," Zax's voice boomed across the chamber, "you dare to interfere with our sacred traditions?" George stepped forward, emboldened by the ambrosia's effects. "Your traditions are built on suffering, Elder Zax, and your weapons deal threatens not just my people, but the peace of this entire sector." Zax's eyes narrowed. "You know nothing of our ways or our needs, outsider." "I know enough to see that the milking process is cruel and unnecessary," George retorted, his voice rising. "How can you justify the pain it causes your own people?" As George engaged Zax in debate, he caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of his eye. Petra and Vex had slipped into the chamber unnoticed, using the distraction he was creating. "Our ways have sustained us for millennia," Zax growled, taking a step closer to George. "Who are you to question them?" "Someone who values life and peace," George shot back, noticing how Petra and Vex were scanning the room, searching for something. Suddenly, Vex stepped forward, a small vial in her hand. "Elder Zax," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "please accept this offering of our finest ambrosia. Perhaps it will help calm this discussion." Zax's eyes locked onto the vial, a flicker of desire crossing his face. He reached out with his left hand, and as his fingers closed around the vial, Vex deliberately tipped it. A single drop of the concentrated ambrosia fell onto Zax's palm. The effect was instantaneous. Zax's body went rigid, his eyes wide with shock. In that moment of distraction, Petra darted forward, her fingers working with precision to extract a small, crystalline object from Zax's palm. "Now!" George shouted, springing into action. The chamber erupted into chaos. George ducked under the swing of a guard's weapon, using the combat techniques he'd learned on Earth to disable his attacker. Beside him, Petra and Vex moved with fluid grace, using their knowledge of Aridian pressure points to incapacitate their opponents. They fought their way to the chamber's exit, George's heart pounding as they raced through the monastery's corridors. The sound of pursuit grew louder behind them. "This way," Petra called, leading them down a narrow passage. They emerged into a wider hallway, only to find themselves face to face with a group of elite Aridian warriors guarding a nondescript door. George's eyes widened as he recognized it as the entrance to the secret vault. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Monk Kral appeared, his deep voice ringing out. "Brothers, sisters, have you not questioned the ethics of our actions? The pain we inflict in the name of tradition?" The guards hesitated, their loyalty visibly wavering. In that moment of confusion, George pressed the biometric key, the crystalline object Petra had retrieved, against the vault's lock. The door slid open with a soft hiss. They rushed inside, George's eyes immediately drawn to a pedestal at the center of the vault. On it sat a device unlike anything he had ever seen, the Genesis core. Its surface pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and George felt a surge of hope as he realized its potential. As he reached for the core, the effects of the ambrosia intensified. George's senses sharpened further, and he became acutely aware of Petra and Vex's presence beside him. Their alien features, once so foreign, now seemed impossibly alluring. He noticed their eyes on him, filled with a mixture of awe and desire. The moment was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. Elder Zax's voice rang out, filled with rage. "Heretics, traitors to our sacred ways!" George turned to face the entrance, the Genesis core clutched tightly in his hands. Petra and Vex moved to stand beside him, their bodies tense and ready for action. Elder Zax appeared in the doorway, flanked by his loyal followers, his golden eyes blazing with fury. "You will pay for this betrayal," Zax snarled, his gaze fixed on the Genesis core in George's grasp. George stood his ground, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. In his hands, he held the key to changing the fate of two civilizations. The air crackled with tension as both sides faced off, neither willing to back down. The standoff stretched on, the future hanging in the balance. George's mind raced, searching for a way to determination the conflict without bloodshed. He knew that his next move would determine not just his fate, but that of Petra, Vex, and countless others across the galaxy. Galaxy. Time seemed to slow as George's mind raced through their options. A direct confrontation with Elder Zax and his followers could lead to bloodshed and ruin any chance of peaceful resolution. In that split second, George's fingers found a small indentation on the Genesis core's surface. He pressed it without hesitation. The core hummed to life, emitting a blinding pulse of light that filled the vault. Zax and his followers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. George felt Petra's hand on his arm, urging him to move. "This way," Vex hissed, tugging aside an ancient tapestry to reveal a narrow maintenance tunnel. They scrambled inside, the sound of angry shouts fading behind them as they crawled through the dusty passage. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning until George lost all sense of direction. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber, blinking as their eyes adjusted to the dim light. George's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene before him. They stood on a catwalk overlooking an enormous room filled with bubbling vats of glowing ambrosia. The air was thick with a sweet, cloying scent that made his head spin. But it was the sight below that truly shocked him. Dozens of Aridian monks were strapped to strange contraptions, their faces contorted in agony as the machines extracted the precious fluid from their bodies. The milking process, in all its brutal reality, lay exposed before them. "By the stars," Petra whispered, her voice tight with horror. George's grip on the Genesis core tightened. "We have to stop this. There has to be another way." As they made their way down to the main floor, a group of younger monks approached them cautiously. At their head was a female Aridian with shimmering teal skin and mesmerizing silver eyes. "You're the ones who stole the core," she said, her gaze fixed on George. "I'm Lyra. We've been waiting for someone like you." George explained their mission, showing Lyra and her followers the Genesis core. As he spoke, he found himself drawn to her, the effects of the ambrosia still heightening his senses and emotions. "We've been researching alternative methods of ambrosia production," Lyra revealed, her eyes shining with excitement. "With the core, we might finally have a chance to end the milking for good." Their discussion was cut short by a deafening alarm. The entire monastery shuddered, walls shifting and passages sealing off around them. "Zax has activated the defense systems," Lyra explained, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to get to the command center." They raced through the rapidly changing corridors, narrowly avoiding being crushed by moving walls. George felt the Genesis core pulse in his hands, reacting to the chaos around them. As they ran, he noticed the ambrosia in the vats beginning to glow more intensely, its sweet scent growing stronger. They finally reached the command center, a circular room filled with ancient technology. Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, temporarily disabling the defense grid. "We've got another problem," Vex called out, her eyes wide as she stared at a holographic display. "There's a transmission coming in. It's the weapons dealers. They're on their way here with a massive fleet." George's heart sank as he listened to the intercepted message. Zax wasn't just planning to sell weapons. He intended to use them to conquer neighboring systems and attack Earth itself. The gravity of the situation hit George like a physical blow. He leaned against a console, suddenly overwhelmed by the competing sensations coursing through his body. The enhanced ambrosia field generated by the core's activation was affecting everyone in the room, intensifying the already charged atmosphere. He looked at Petra, Vex, and Lyra, acutely aware of their alien beauty and the growing attraction he felt towards them. But he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. "We need to stop Zax and warn Earth," George said, his voice husky with suppressed emotion. "But how?" Lyra's silver eyes met his, filled with a mixture of commitment and desire. "We can use the Genesis core to synthesize a massive amount of ambrosia. Flood the monastery with it. It'll incapacitate Zax and his followers and prove that we can produce it without harming anyone." "But what about the weapons dealers?" Petra asked, her skin flushed a deeper shade of blue. George's gaze fell on the long-range communication panel. "We could warn Earth, call for help, but using it might give away our location to Zax." The air in the command center grew heavy with tension and unspoken desire. George looked at his companions, each of them affected by the ambrosia field, yet still focused on their mission. They stood at a crossroads, the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. "What do we do?" Vex asked, her voice barely above a whisper. George took a deep breath, weighing their options. The Genesis core hummed in his hands, a constant reminder of the power they held and the responsibility that came with it. As he opened his mouth to speak, a new alarm blared to life, adding fresh urgency to their already precarious situation. George's mind raced, weighing their options as the alarms continued to blare. "We need to act now," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We'll warn Earth and flood the monastery with synthesized ambrosia simultaneously." Lyra nodded, her silver eyes gleaming. "I'll start the synthesis process with the Genesis core. Vex, help me calibrate the system." As Lyra and Vex worked on the core, George and Petra moved to the long-range communication panel. Their fingers flew over the controls, inputting a coded message to Earth's defense forces. "This is Agent George Hartley." George spoke into the transmitter, his voice tight with urgency. "Code Delta 79er. Alien weapons dealers approaching Aridian space. Hostile fleet en route. Request immediate assistance." The moment the transmission ended, Lyra called out, "Synthesis complete. Initiating monastery-wide distribution." A low hum filled the air as the newly created ambrosia flooded the ventilation system. Within seconds, the sweet scent intensified, and George felt a fresh wave of euphoria wash over him. "It's working," Petra gasped, her blue skin flushing a deeper shade. "I can feel the effects spreading." Through the command center's monitors, they watched as Elder Zax and his followers stumbled and swayed, overcome by the concentrated ambrosia. But the team's victory was short-lived as they too began to feel the heightened effects. George found himself hyper-aware of Petra's proximity, the curve of her neck, the softness of her skin. He shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand. "We need to secure the monastery," he managed, his voice husky. Vex nodded, her eyes dilated. "I'll use the reconfiguration system. We can trap Zax and open a path to the main control room." As Vex worked, the monastery began to shift around them. Walls moved, corridors sealed, and new pathways opened. They made their way through the changing structure, encountering groups of disoriented monks along the way. "Elder Zax lied to us," Lyra explained to the confused Aridians. "He planned to sell weapons and wage war. Join us in stopping him." Many of the monks, their minds cleared by the truth and the pure ambrosia, chose to follow. As they navigated the shifting corridors, George stumbled into a hidden chamber. His eyes widened as he took in the array of ancient artifacts. "Look at this," he called to the others, holding up a strange device. "It's some kind of resonator." Lyra gasped. "The harmonic resonator. It can amplify and direct ambrosia's effects. We can use it against Zax and enhance our own resistance." They pressed on, the resonator tucked safely in George's pack. As they approached the main control room, a group of elite Aridian guards blocked their path. "Traitors," one of the guards snarled. "You'll pay for your betrayal." The corridor erupted into chaos. George ducked under a swinging fist, countering with a swift jab to his attacker's solar plexus. Beside him, Petra moved with fluid grace, her fingers finding pressure points with unerring accuracy. In the close quarters, bodies pressed together, and George found himself momentarily distracted by the feel of Petra's back against his chest. He caught Vex's eye, seeing his own desire mirrored there. The skirmish ended quickly, with the guards incapacitated and the team breathing heavily. The air was thick with tension and unspoken attraction. "We should move on," Lyra said, her voice breathy. They secured the main control room, quickly establishing a safe zone by filtering out the excess ambrosia. As their heads cleared, they turned their attention to the monastery's external defenses. Suddenly, the long-range sensors lit up. "Multiple ships incoming," Vex announced, her fingers flying over the controls. "Wait, it's not the weapons dealers. It's a human fleet, and they're not alone." George leaned in, his heart racing. "Earth got our message. They've brought allies." Their relief was short-lived as another alert sounded. "More ships," Petra said grimly. "From the opposite direction. It's the weapons dealers." George's mind raced, formulating a plan. "We need to use everything at our disposal. The monastery's defenses, the harmonic resonator, our control over ambrosia production. We can turn this place into a fortress." As they worked feverishly to prepare for the coming battle, George couldn't help but notice the lingering glances between him and his Aridian allies. The connection between them had grown stronger, complicated by their shared experiences in the ambrosia's lingering effects. With both friendly and hostile forces converging on their position, George knew the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but that of the entire sector. As he looked at Petra, Vex, and Lyra, he felt a surge of commitment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a united front. George took a deep breath, steadying himself as he surveyed the command center. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice filled with grit. The team sprang into action, their movements synchronized as if they had trained together for years. Vex's fingers danced across the ancient control panels, activating the monastery's long-dormant defense systems. A low hum reverberated through the structure as the Aridian shield technology came to life, enveloping the monastery in a shimmering barrier of energy. Meanwhile, Lyra and Petra worked on integrating the harmonic resonator with the ambrosia synthesis system. George watched in fascination as they expertly manipulated the alien technology, their bodies moving with an otherworldly grace that he found increasingly difficult to ignore. "The resonator is online," Lyra announced, her silver eyes gleaming with excitement. "We can now amplify and direct the ambrosia's effects." George nodded, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. "Good. We'll use it to create a non-lethal weapon against any hostile forces that make it past our outer defenses." As they worked, George couldn't help but notice the changes occurring in his Aridian allies. Their skin began to emit a soft, pulsating glow, and their movements became even more fluid and graceful. He felt a pull towards each of them, an attraction that went beyond the physical and threatened to overwhelm his senses. Suddenly, the monastery's sensors blared to life. Vex rushed to the main display, her eyes widening as she took in the information. "First wave of ships incoming," she reported. It's a human fleet, and they're not alone." George's heart leaped as he recognized the configuration of the lead ship. "That's an Earth Defense Force vessel," he said, moving quickly to the communication panel. "Open a channel." The screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of a human woman with close-cropped gray hair and piercing blue eyes. "This is Commander Sarah Henderson of the Earth Defense Force," she announced. "Identify yourself." "Commander, this is Agent George Hartley," George replied, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for responding to our distress call. We have a situation here that's about to get very complicated." As George quickly briefed Commander Henderson on the impending arrival of the weapons dealers and the corruption within the Aridian leadership, the monastery's sensors detected another incoming fleet. "The weapons dealers just dropped out of hyperspace," Petra reported, her voice tense. Commander Henderson's expression hardened. "Understood, Agent Hartley. We'll engage the hostile fleet and buy you time to secure the monastery. What kind of support can you provide?" George glanced at Lyra, who nodded confidently. "We have access to the monastery's ancient weapon systems," he told Henderson. "We'll provide cover fire and target their propulsion systems." As the battle erupted in orbit around Iridia 4, George and his team worked in perfect harmony. Vex directed the monastery's energy beams with surgical precision, disabling several enemy ships. Petra and Lyra managed the defense grid, ensuring the protective barrier held against any stray weapons fire. The synchronized efficiency of their efforts was suddenly shattered as alarms blared throughout the control room. "Intruder alert!" Vex shouted, her eyes scanning the security feeds. "It's Elder Zax and his loyalists. They've broken free and are heading this way." George's mind raced as he assessed their options. "Lyra, Petra, keep managing our defenses. Vex, you're with me. We need to hold them off." As George and Vex took up defensive positions near the entrance, the door burst open. Elder Zax stormed in, his face contorted with rage, followed by a group of his most devoted followers. "Traitors!" Zax bellowed, lunging at George. The control room erupted into chaos. George ducked under Zax's wild swing, countering with a swift jab to the Aridian's midsection. Beside him, Vex moved with inhuman speed, her glowing skin leaving trails of light as she incapacitated two attackers in rapid succession. Despite their enhanced abilities, George and his team found themselves hard-pressed by the sheer number of assailants. As he grappled with a particularly large Aridian, George was knocked back against the control panel. His hand slammed down on the activation switch for the harmonic resonator. A wave of pure energy pulsed through the monastery, radiating outward into space. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Elder Zax and his followers collapsed to the ground, their faces slack with euphoria. Petra, Vex, and Lyra gasped in unison, their bodies arching as the amplified ambrosia surged through them. George felt the wave wash over him, and suddenly the world came into sharp focus. The complex Aridian technology that had seemed so alien before now made perfect sense. He moved to the main control panel, his fingers flying over the buttons and switches with intuitive understanding. "I'm stabilizing the monastery systems," he announced, his voice steady, despite the sensory overload he was experiencing, "and broadcasting the truth about Elder Zax's corruption to all of Iridia." As the amplified ambrosia spread through space, the weapons dealers' ships drifted aimlessly, their crews incapacitated by the overwhelming sensation. The human and allied fleet, though affected, managed to maintain enough control to secure the disabled enemy vessels. With the immediate threat neutralized, George turned to his Aridian companions. The connection between them had intensified beyond anything he had ever experienced. He could sense their thoughts, feel their emotions as if they were his own. The attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface now threatened to consume him entirely. Before he could process these new feelings, the communication panel chimed. Commander Henderson's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of concern and awe. "Agent Hartley, what in the world did you do?" she asked. "Half our fleet is flying in patterns, and the weapons dealers are completely neutralized." George struggled to find the words to explain, acutely aware of Petra, Vex, and Lyra's presence behind him. "It's a long story, Commander," he managed, "but the immediate threat has been contained." Henderson nodded, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "Understood. We're preparing a diplomatic envoy to shuttle down to your location. We need to discuss the implications of this technology and the future of human-Aridian relations." As the transmission ended, George turned to face his companions. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension and desire. They had won the battle, but a new challenge now lay before them, navigating the complex web of their newfound connection while preparing to shape the future of interstellar politics. Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes locking with George's. "We should prepare for the envoy's arrival," she said, her voice husky. "There's much to discuss." George nodded, acutely aware of the monumental task that lay ahead. As they moved to make preparations, he couldn't help but wonder how their enhanced connection would influence the negotiations to come. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and the lines between personal and political had never been more blurred. Blurred as the implications of their enhanced connection and the monumental task ahead sank in. The sound of approaching shuttles broke through George's reverie. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus on the immediate priorities. "We need to secure Zax and his followers before the envoy arrives," he said, his voice steady despite the lingering effects of the amplified ambrosia. Vex nodded, her luminescent skin pulsing with renewed energy. There's a containment area in the lower levels. We can use it to hold them until we decide how to proceed. Working with practiced efficiency, the team swiftly rounded up Elder Zax and his remaining loyal followers. The corrupted Aridians, still dazed from the harmonic resonator's effects, offered little resistance as they were led to the secure area. As George sealed the containment field, he felt the amplified ambrosia's influence begin to wane. His thoughts became sharper, more focused, though the heightened awareness of his companions remained. The Envoy's shuttle is on final approach, Lyra announced, her silver eyes fixed on the monastery sensor readouts. George straightened his uniform, keenly aware of the gravity of the moment. Let's go meet our guests. The team made their way to the monastery's main landing pad, where the sleek diplomatic shuttle touched down with a soft hiss of hydraulics. The hatch opened, revealing a tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that immediately reminded George of Commander Henderson. Ambassador Marcus Henderson, the man introduced himself, extending a hand to George. I believe you've already met my sister, Commander Sarah Henderson. George shook the ambassador's hand firmly. Agent George Hartley, welcome to Aridia 4, Ambassador. As the rest of the diplomatic team disembarked, George couldn't help but notice the eager expressions on the faces of the Earth scientists accompanying them. Their eyes darted around the ancient monastery, drinking in every detail of the alien technology surrounding them. George quickly introduced his Aridian allies, noting the way Ambassador Henderson's gaze lingered on each of them, no doubt taking in their otherworldly beauty and the faint glow still emanating from their skin. We have much to discuss, the ambassador said, his tone businesslike. I understand you've made some remarkable discoveries here, Agent Hartley. Discoveries that could potentially solve Earth's energy crisis. Before George could respond, a commotion at the edge of the landing pad caught his attention. A group of Iridians approached, led by a striking figure with luminescent indigo skin and piercing silver eyes that seemed to bore into George's very soul. Matriarch Zira, Petra whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and respect. The Aridian leader strode forward, her movements fluid and graceful. I am Matriarch Zira, she announced, her voice rich and melodious. On behalf of those who have long opposed Elder Zax's corrupt regime, I offer our deepest gratitude to you, George Hartley, and your companions. George found himself momentarily speechless, captivated by Matriarch Zira's presence. He forced himself to focus, acutely aware of the complex emotions swirling within him. Thank you, Matriarch Zira. We're honored by your presence. Ambassador Henderson stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his smooth transition. Matriarch Zira, I'm Ambassador Marcus Henderson from Earth. We're eager to begin discussions on how our civilizations can move forward together in light of recent events. As the group moved inside the monastery to commence negotiations, George felt a familiar tension building within him. The lingering effects of the amplified ambrosia seemed to sharpen his mind, allowing him to process the complex diplomatic and scientific concepts being discussed with surprising ease. In the grand meeting hall, Earth scientists huddled around holographic displays of the Genesis core and harmonic resonator, their excited whispers filling the air. George found himself seamlessly explaining intricate details of Aridian technology, surprising even himself with his newfound understanding. The potential applications are staggering, one of the lead scientists exclaimed. If we can harness this technology, we could create a stable, self-sustaining energy source that would revolutionize power generation across the galaxy. Ambassador Henderson's eyes gleamed with excitement. This could be the solution we've been searching for. We need to establish an immediate technology exchange program. As discussions progressed, George couldn't help but notice the growing tension between himself and his Aridian companions. Every accidental brush of hands or shared glance sent electricity coursing through his body. He struggled to maintain his professional demeanor, acutely aware of Petra's quickened breath when she leaned in to whisper a clarification, or the way Vex's fingers lingered on his arm as she guided him to a new display. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the atmosphere of scientific discovery and diplomatic progress. George's heart raced as he recognized the sound, a high-priority security alert. "The weapons dealer's fleet," Vex gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. "They're powering up." George's mind raced, processing the implications. "We need to get to the control room. Now!" As they rushed through the monastery's winding corridors, George's enhanced cognitive abilities kicked into overdrive. By the time they reached the control room, a plan was already forming in his mind. "We need to reactivate the defense systems," he ordered, his fingers flying over the alien controls with newfound confidence. "Lyra, prepare the harmonic resonator. We're going to create a focused beam of amplified ambrosia energy." As his companions sprang into action, George's gaze fell on the pulsing heart of the harmonic resonator. A sobering realization struck him. Using the device at such high power could have unforeseen consequences for himself and his Aridian allies. The concentrated ambrosia energy might permanently alter their physiology, enhancing their abilities further, but risking unknown side effects. George's hand hovered over the activation switch, the weight of his decision bearing down on him. The weapons dealer's ships loomed on the display, their weapons systems coming online. In orbit, the human fleet moved to intercept, but they were clearly outmatched. Time seemed to slow as George grappled with his choice. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, but so did the well-being of those he had come to care for deeply. As the first flashes of weapons fire erupted in space, George steeled himself, knowing that whatever he decided would change everything. Everything forever. His hand moved decisively, activating the harmonic resonator at full power. "Everyone, to your stations," George commanded, his voice carrying an authority he'd never felt before. "We need to focus the ambrosia energy into a concentrated beam." Petra, Vex, and Lyra rushed to their positions, their movements fluid and synchronized. As they took their places around the pulsing heart of the harmonic resonator, George felt a moment of hesitation. "There's something you need to know," he said, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "This level of exposure to amplified ambrosia, it could change us permanently. Are you sure you want to do this?" Vex's luminescent skin flickered with persistence. "We're with you, George, whatever the cost." Petra nodded, her silver eyes gleaming. "Our world is at stake. We have no choice." Lyra's fingers danced over her control panel. "We're ready when you are." George took a deep breath, steadying himself. "All right. Petra, manage power distribution. Vex, handle targeting systems. Lyra, monitor ambrosia synthesis. I'll operate the main controls. Let's do this." As one, they activated their respective systems. The harmonic resonator hummed to life, its energy building to a crescendo. George felt a surge of amplified ambrosia coursing through his body, every nerve ending alive with sensation. His vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid, and time seemed to slow. The concentrated beam of ambrosia energy lanced out from the monastery, cutting through space with terrifying precision. On the monitors, George watched as it struck the first of the weapons dealer's ships. The effect was instantaneous. Hostile vessel's shields flared brilliantly before collapsing. Its hull glowed with residual energy as its systems overloaded, power cascading through its circuitry in a chain reaction. One by one, the ships of the weapons dealer's fleet fell dark, drifting harmlessly in the void. "It's working," Petra exclaimed, her voice tight with exertion. "The human fleet is moving in to secure the disabled ships." But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the control room as the monastery system strained under the immense energy output. "Power fluctuations detected," Vex reported, her fingers flying over her console. "We're at risk of a cascade failure." George felt a new clarity of thought, his mind processing information at an unprecedented speed. "Lyra, divert power from non-essential systems. Petra, initiate a controlled shutdown of the secondary generators. Vex, reroute coolant to the primary power couplings." As they worked to stabilize the monastery systems, George became acutely aware of the changes happening to his body. A faint, iridescent sheen began to spread across his skin, reminiscent of his Aridian companions. He glanced at Petra, Vex, and Lyra, noting the increased grace of their movements and the sharpened awareness in their eyes. With a final surge of effort, they managed to bring the monastery's systems back under control. The alarms fell silent, replaced by the steady hum of stabilized equipment. "We did it," George breathed, allowing himself a moment of relief before refocusing on the task at hand. "We need to get back to the diplomatic meeting. They need to know what's happened." As they hurried through the corridors, George became aware of a new sensation. It was as if he could sense the emotions radiating from his companions. Petra's lingering adrenaline, Vex's curiosity about their transformation, Lyra's concern for what lay ahead. This unexpected telepathic connection added a new layer of intimacy to their already complex relationship. They burst into the grand meeting hall, interrupting the ongoing discussions between Ambassador Henderson and Matriarch Zira. The ambassador's eyes widened as he took in George's altered appearance. "Agent Hartley, what in the world—" "The weapons dealer's fleet has been neutralized," George reported, cutting off the ambassador's question. "We used the harmonic resonator to disable their ships. The human fleet is securing them now." Matriarch Zira stepped forward, her silver eyes studying George and his companions intently. "You've used the amplified ambrosia on yourselves," she stated, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "You've made a great sacrifice for our people." Ambassador Henderson's diplomatic mask slipped for a moment, revealing his shock. "Sacrifice? What exactly has happened to you, Agent Hartley?" Before George could respond, one of the Earth scientists approached, a handheld scanner whirring as he passed it over George's body. "Fascinating," the scientist muttered. "Their cellular structure has been fundamentally altered. The ambrosia energy has enhanced their physical and mental capabilities, but it's changed them on a genetic level." The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air. George could sense the mix of excitement and apprehension from the Earth delegation, the curiosity and concern from the Aridians. Matriarch Zira's voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps this transformation offers us an opportunity," she said, her gaze moving from George to Ambassador Henderson. "Agent Hartley and his companions now stand as living bridges between our two species. They embody the potential of what we can achieve together." The matriarch's words sparked a flurry of discussion. Ambassador Henderson voiced concerns about long-term effects and ethical implications, while Earth scientists eagerly proposed studies and experiments. Aridian representatives debated the cultural impact of this new development. As the negotiations intensified, reports began flooding in from across Aridia 4. The truth about Elder Zax's corruption and the potential of the new ambrosia technology was spreading rapidly, causing social and political upheaval across the planet. George found himself at the center of it all, his unique position making him a key figure in shaping the future relationship between humans and Aridians. He could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, even as he grappled with the implications of his own transformation. As the discussions continued, George exchanged glances with Petra, Vex, and Lyra. Their newfound telepathic connection allowed them to share their thoughts and feelings without words. They all understood the challenges that lay ahead, navigating interspecies diplomacy, exploring the potential of ambrosia technology, and coming to terms with their own evolving identities and relationships. Matriarch Zira approached George, her expression solemn. "We must address our people," she said. "They need to understand what has happened and what it means for our future. Are you prepared to speak with me, George Hartley, to help guide our civilizations into this new era?" George nodded, feeling the support and strength of his companions flowing through their mental link. As they prepared to face the Aridian public, he knew that their words and actions would have far-reaching consequences for both human and Aridian civilizations. The path ahead was uncertain, but George was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. His mind racing with the possibilities and challenges that lay ahead. As they stepped onto the monastery's main balcony, George's breath caught in his throat. The courtyard below was a sea of expectant faces. Aridians of all ages and castes gathered to hear their words. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but he felt a surge of confidence flow through his newly forged telepathic link with Petra, Vex, and Lyra. George's skin began to emit a soft, pulsating glow that matched his Aridian companions. The crowd's collective gasp echoed through the courtyard as they witnessed this visible manifestation of his transformation. He could sense their mixture of awe, curiosity, and trepidation. Taking a deep breath, George stepped forward and began to speak. His voice, enhanced by the ambrosia's effects, carried effortlessly across the gathering. "People of Iridia are four," he began, his words flowing with a clarity that surprised even him. "We stand at the dawn of a new era. The events of the past few days have revealed truths long hidden and unlocked potential we are only beginning to understand." As George spoke, explaining the corruption they had uncovered and the promise of the new ambrosia synthesis technology, he became acutely aware of a growing connection with the crowd. Their emotions washed over him in waves: hope, fear, excitement, skepticism. He found himself instinctively adjusting his words, addressing their unspoken concerns and questions. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the back of the courtyard. A group of Aridians, their faces set in unbreakable spirit, pushed their way through the crowd. At their head was a familiar face, Zorn, once a staunch ally of Elder Zax. "Lies!" Zorn shouted, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "This outsider and his conspirators seek to destroy our way of life. They would have us abandon our sacred traditions for false promises." The crowd's mood shifted, uncertainty and anger rippling through their ranks. Some of Zorn's followers began hurling objects toward the balcony, pieces of rubble, rotten fruit, anything they could get their hands on. George felt a surge of panic from his companions, but something else was rising within him. Without conscious thought, he raised his hands, and a wave of calm seemed to emanate from his glowing skin. The air shimmered with a faint, iridescent mist that settled over the crowd. The effect was instantaneous. The angry shouts died away, replaced by a collective exhalation of tension. Even Zorn and his followers lowered their arms, their expressions shifting from rage to confusion. In the sudden silence, Matriarch Zira stepped forward. Her voice, steady and authoritative, filled the courtyard. "My people, I hear your fears. Change is never easy, but it is often necessary. We need not abandon our traditions to embrace new possibilities. I propose a path forward, a transitional government that includes voices from all segments of our society, including those who wish to preserve our old ways." As Zira continued to outline her proposal, George felt a tug on his sleeve. Ambassador Henderson stood behind him, his face grave. "We've got a situation," Henderson whispered urgently. "Word of the ambrosia technology has leaked back to Earth. Every major power is clamoring for access. If we don't act fast, this could spark a global conflict." George's mind raced, processing the new information. An idea began to form, crystallizing with startling speed and clarity. "Matriarch Zira," he called out, stepping forward once more. "Ambassador Henderson, I have a suggestion." All eyes turned to George as he outlined his plan for an independent, space-based research station. As he spoke, he could feel the crowd's response, a growing sense of hope and possibility. This station would be a symbol of cooperation, George concluded, a place where human and Aridian scientists can work together, ensuring that the benefits of ambrosia technology are shared equally among all. The proposal was met with a chorus of approval from both the crowd and the officials present. Matriarch Zira nodded her assent, while Ambassador Henderson smiled, seeing a diplomatic solution to Earth's brewing crisis. As plans were quickly drawn up to convert an abandoned Aridian space station, George became aware of further changes happening to his body. His senses seemed to sharpen even more, and he found himself able to process multiple streams of information simultaneously. Looking at Petrovex and Lyra, he saw similar transformations taking place. Reports began to filter in of unrest on other Aridian colonies. The news of the revolutionary changes on Aridia 4 had spread faster than anyone had anticipated, sparking debates and conflicts across Aridian space. Amidst the flurry of activity, George and his companions found themselves boarding a shuttle bound for the space station. As they lifted off, George gazed down at the planet below. The glowing cities of Aridia 4 grew smaller, the planet's curve becoming visible against the vast backdrop of space. "We've started something big," Petra said softly, her hand finding George's. "Indeed," Vex added, her luminescent skin pulsing with excitement. "The real work is just beginning." As the shuttle accelerated towards their new home, George felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The challenges ahead were daunting: managing interspecies relations, developing ambrosia technology, and navigating their own evolving identities. Yet as he looked at his companions, he felt a sense of readiness. The stars stretched into lines of light as the shuttle entered hyperspace, carrying them towards their next adventure. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together towards their next adventure. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a united front, their newfound abilities and deepened bonds serving as their greatest strengths. As the shuttle emerged from hyperspace, the abandoned Aridian space station loomed before them, its angular silhouette stark against the backdrop of distant stars. George leaned forward, studying the structure through the view screen. Years of neglect had left their mark on the station's exterior, its once gleaming surface now pitted and scarred. "Initiating docking procedures," Petra announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Suddenly, the shuttle lurched violently, throwing its occupants off balance. Red warning lights flashed across the console as a computerized voice blared, "Warning, defensive systems activated. Hostile target locked." "What's happening?" Lyra cried out, her luminescent skin pulsing with alarm. Vex's eyes widened in recognition. "The station's automated defenses. They must have been dormant all these years." George's mind raced, processing the situation at lightning speed. "The ambrosia energy," he realized aloud. "It's triggering the old Aridian security protocols." As if to confirm his theory, a barrage of energy bolts erupted from the station, peppering the space around their shuttle. Petra's expert piloting kept them one step ahead of the assault, but they couldn't evade forever. "We need to deactivate those defenses," George declared, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Petra, what do you know about Aridian security systems?" Petra's brow furrowed in concentration. "They're complex, but I've studied similar designs. If we can access the main control hub, I might be able to bypass the security measures." George nodded, feeling a surge of dedication. "All right, let's do this. Vex, can you get us close enough to dock manually?" The Aridian nodded, taking the controls from Petra. With expert precision, she maneuvered the shuttle through the barrage of weapons fire, bringing them alongside one of the station's airlocks. As Vex worked to secure their position, George, Petra, and Lyra huddled together, formulating a plan. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allowed them to communicate and strategize at an unprecedented speed, their thoughts flowing seamlessly between them. The moment the airlock sealed, they sprang into action. Petra led the way, her knowledge of Aridian technology guiding them through the labyrinthine corridors. George followed close behind, his skin emitting a soft glow that illuminated their path through the darkened station. They encountered their first obstacle at a sealed security door. Petra placed her hand on the access panel, closing her eyes in concentration. To George's amazement, lines of code seemed to flow from her fingertips, interfacing directly with the station systems. "I'm in," she announced after a tense moment, "but the security protocols are more complex than I anticipated. George, I need your help to process this data." Without hesitation, George stepped forward, placing his hand next to Petra's. As their skin made contact, he felt a surge of information flood his mind. Together, they sifted through layers of encryption, their enhanced abilities working in perfect synchronization. With a satisfying hiss, the security door slid open. They pressed on, navigating through a maze of corridors and chambers. The station's interior was a testament to years of abandonment. Dust-covered consoles, flickering lights, and the occasional floating debris creating an eerie atmosphere. Finally, they reached the central control hub. As Petra and George worked to decipher the main security systems, Vex stood guard at the entrance, her enhanced strength and agility ready to defend against any potential threats. Lyra, her telepathic abilities now encompassing the entire station, provided constant updates on the shuttle's status and any changes in the defense system's behavior. After what felt like hours but was merely minutes, George's fingers flew across the main console, inputting the final command sequence Petra had decrypted. The station shuddered, and a wave of energy rippled through its structure. Slowly, the red warning lights faded, replaced by the soft blue glow of standby mode. "We did it," George breathed, allowing himself a moment of relief. "The defenses are down." As the adrenaline of their impromptu mission faded, the team took stock of their surroundings. The control hub, despite its advanced technology, showed signs of long neglect. Dust-covered panels and inactive screens surrounded them, hinting at the station's former glory and the work that lay ahead. "We should begin assessing the damage," Vex suggested, her practical nature coming to the fore. "If we're to transform this into a research facility, we have a lot of work ahead of us." George nodded in agreement, but before he could respond, Lyra's voice cut through the air, tinged with excitement. "Wait, I'm sensing something strange. There's a sealed chamber nearby, and it's calling to me somehow." Intrigued, the group followed Lyra's telepathic guidance through a series of corridors, eventually arriving at a heavily reinforced door. Unlike the rest of the station, this area seemed to hum with latent energy. "Whatever's in there," Petra observed, running her hand along the door's surface, "it's been carefully preserved. This isn't just another storage room." George stepped forward, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the chamber. As his glowing hand approached the access panel, the door responded to his touch, sliding open with a pneumatic hiss. The chamber beyond was filled with sleek, unfamiliar technology. At its center stood a device that immediately captured their attention, a cylindrical structure pulsing with a soft, amber light. "Incredible," Vex breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "This must be some kind of ambrosia-based technology, but its design, it's far more advanced than anything I've ever seen." As they cautiously entered the chamber, George felt drawn to the central device. His fingers brushed against its surface, and suddenly the room erupted in a blinding flash of light. Waves of concentrated ambrosia energy surged through the air, enveloping all four of them. George gasped as he felt the energy coursing through his body, accelerating the changes that had already begun. His skin now emitted a bright, pulsating glow, and he could sense the ambrosia fields around him, almost as if they were extensions of his own body. As the light faded, George looked at his companions, seeing the dramatic effects of their exposure. Petra's eyes glowed with an inner light as she interfaced effortlessly with the station's systems. Vex moved with a newfound grace and power, her muscles rippling with enhanced strength. Lyra stood perfectly still, her mind clearly reaching out far beyond the confines of the station. Before they could fully process these changes, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her voice urgent as she relayed the information flooding her expanded consciousness. "A distress signal," she announced. "A human science vessel, the HSS Curiosity. They're drifting into Aridian space with critical system failures." George straightened, his new abilities already analyzing the situation. "We need to mount a rescue mission," he declared, his voice carrying a new note of authority. "Petra, can you get the communication systems online? We need to respond to that distress call." As Petra nodded and set to work, George turned to Vex. "We'll need transportation. See if you can get one of the old Aridian shuttles operational." Vex grinned, flexing her enhanced muscles. "With pleasure." As his team sprang into action, George felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Their newfound abilities would be put to the test sooner than expected, and the fate of the HSS Curiosity and its crew now rested in their hands. Little did they know that this rescue mission would lead them into an encounter that would challenge not only their abilities, but also their loyalties, as they faced off against the notorious space pirate, Captain Zora, and her crew. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the future of ambrosia technology and interstellar relations in ways they could not yet imagine. As the gravity of the situation sank in, George knew they had to act fast. "Petra, status report on our communications," he called out, his voice steady despite the urgency. "Online and functional," Petra responded, her fingers flying over the newly activated console. "I've established contact with the HSS Curiosity. They're reporting multiple system failures and are on emergency power." George nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. Vex, how's our transportation looking? The Aridian's voice echoed from the nearby hangar. I've got one of the old shuttles operational. It's not pretty, but it'll fly. Good enough, George replied. Lyra, keep monitoring their situation. We need to know if anything changes. As they prepared for the rescue mission, George couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The timing of the Curiosity's distress call, so soon after their own arrival at the station, seemed too coincidental. Within minutes, they were aboard the refurbished Aridian shuttle, racing towards the coordinates of the distressed vessel. As they approached, George's enhanced vision picked out the sleek form of the HSS Curiosity, its hull dark and lifeless against the star-studded backdrop. Something's not right, Vex muttered, her eyes narrowing as she piloted their craft closer. Those aren't standard scientific modifications on their hull. Before George could respond, Lyra's voice cut through the tension. Multiple ships decloaking. They're surrounding the Curiosity. Suddenly, the seemingly dead ship erupted into action. Lights blazed to life along its hull as it maneuvered with surprising agility. The newly revealed ships, a motley collection of heavily armed vessels, fell into formation around it. It's a trap, George realized aloud, his mind racing to catch up with the rapidly unfolding situation. A crackling transmission filled their shuttle's cockpit. Well, a smooth feminine voice purred. Looks like we've caught ourselves some interesting prey. This is Captain Zara of the Crimson Corsairs. You've stumbled into our little web, my friends. Now let's talk business. George exchanged glances with his companions, their enhanced abilities allowing for a rapid, silent exchange of ideas. In that brief moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of their mission. Captain Zara, George responded, his voice calm and measured. This is George Haverden. I propose we meet face-to-face to discuss this situation. There may be a mutually beneficial solution we haven't considered yet. A pause followed, filled with crackling static. Then Captain Zara's voice returned, tinged with curiosity. Intriguing proposition, George Haverton. Very well, there's an uninhabited asteroid nearby. We'll meet there in 1 standard hour. Bring 1 companion, and I'll do the same. Any tricks and my ships will reduce you to space dust. Understood? Understood, Captain. We'll see you there. As the transmission cut off, Petra turned to George, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and admiration. Are you sure about this, George? We don't know what we're walking into. George nodded, feeling a surge of drive. It's our best option. We need to persistence this peacefully if we can. Petra, you're with me. Vex, Lyra, stay with the shuttle and be ready for anything. An hour later, George and Petra stood on the rocky surface of the asteroid, their shuttle parked a short distance away. The barren landscape stretched out around them, pockmarked with craters and devoid of any signs of life. A sleek black ship descended from the sky, touching down gracefully 100 meters from their position. The ship's airlock hissed open, and 2 figures emerged. George's breath caught in his throat as he laid eyes on Captain Zara for the first time. She was tall and statuesque, her body covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the starlight. Her eyes, piercing and alert, seemed to shift color as she approached, moving from deep purple to vibrant green. Despite the tense circumstances, George felt an unexpected spark of attraction. He pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. Captain Zara, he greeted, keeping his voice neutral. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Zara's lips curled into a smirk. My curiosity got the better of me, George Haverton. Now tell me why I shouldn't just take your ship and be on my way. George took a deep breath, then began to explain. He spoke of Ambrosia technology, its potential, and the work they were doing on the space station. He carefully omitted critical details, aware of the dangers of this knowledge falling into the wrong hands. As he spoke, he noticed Zara's expression changing. The initial skepticism gave way to intrigue, her color-shifting eyes widening with each new revelation. Fascinating, Zara murmured when George finished. And you're offering to share this technology? In a limited capacity, George clarified. We're proposing an alliance. You cease your piracy operations and in return, you get a supply of ambrosia and the opportunity to work with us on the station." Zara opened her mouth to respond, but her words were cut short by a violent tremor that shook the asteroid. The ground beneath their feet began to crack, fissures spreading rapidly across the surface. "The asteroid's core is destabilizing," Petra shouted, her enhanced senses feeding her information about their surroundings. "We need to get out of here." George's mind raced, assessing their options. "Everyone, back to the ships," he commanded, already moving towards their shuttle. As they ran, the asteroid's surface began to break apart. Massive chunks of rock lifted into the air, creating a maze of floating debris. George's newfound abilities kicked in, allowing him to manipulate the ambrosia energy fields around them to create a stable path. They were almost at the ships when a particularly violent quake sent a shower of rocks raining down on them. George heard a cry of pain and turned to see Captain Zara pinned beneath a large boulder, her scales dulled with dust and blood. Without hesitation, George rushed to her side. Using his enhanced strength, he lifted the boulder off her body. Zara looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and wonder. "Why?" she gasped. "Because it's the right thing to do," George replied simply. He placed his hands on her injured leg, channeling the ambrosia energy within him. To his amazement, the wound began to close, the scales knitting back together. Zara stared at her healed leg, then back at George. Something had shifted in her gaze, the hardness of the pirate captain giving way to a softer, more vulnerable expression. They made it back to their respective ships, just as the asteroid began to break apart in earnest. As they lifted off, the celestial body exploded behind them, sending shock waves through space that rocked their vessels. Once they were clear of the debris field, Captain Zara's voice came through the communication system. "George Haverton," she said, her tone thoughtful. "It seems I misjudged you and your team. Your offer? I accept it. My crew and I will join you on your station." As they set course back to the space station, George felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The addition of Captain Zara and her crew would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. The station was about to become a melting pot of cultures and ideas with the potential to revolutionize their understanding of ambrosia technology. Looking out at the stars streaking past, George couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. The universe, it seemed, had many more surprises in store for them and their newfound allies. As they approached the space station, George couldn't shake the feeling that their recent encounter with Captain Zara was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. The shuttle docked smoothly, and as they disembarked, George was struck by the bustling activity that now filled the once-abandoned station. Captain Zara's crew, a diverse group of individuals from various species and backgrounds, had integrated seamlessly with the existing team, bringing new energy and expertise to their operations. As George led the way to the central command hub, he noticed Petra's worried expression. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his enhanced senses picking up on her elevated heart rate. Petra bit her lip, her eyes flickering to the various displays lining the corridor. "I've been monitoring the station system since we left. Something's not right with the main reactor." George frowned, quickening his pace. As they entered the command hub, alarms began to blare, confirming Petra's suspicions. Vex and Lyra were already there, their faces illuminated by the flashing red emergency lights. "Report," George commanded, his voice steady despite the growing tension. Vex's fingers danced over the control panel. "The main reactor is showing signs of instability. The synthesized ambrosia powering it is behaving erratically." Lyra nodded, her eyes distant, as she processed the data streaming through her enhanced mind. The sudden influx of inhabitants and increased power demands have pushed it beyond its original design specifications. George's mind raced, calculating potential solutions. "We need to convene an emergency meeting. Now." Within minutes, the core team had assembled, joined by Captain Zara. As they discussed the severity of the situation, it became clear that without a stable power source, the entire station and the Ambrosia research project were at risk. Captain Zara leaned forward, her color-shifting eyes intense. "My ship's advanced power cells could serve as a temporary solution. It won't be a permanent fix, but it could buy us some time." George nodded, grateful for her input. "Let's implement that immediately. Petra worked with Captain Zara's engineers to integrate the power cells into our systems. As they set to work, George and Vex delved deeper into the station's infrastructure. Searching for a more permanent solution, their enhanced abilities allowed them to access areas of the station that had long been sealed off. Deep within the station's core, they discovered a hidden chamber. The room hummed with latent energy, its walls covered in intricate Aridian glyphs. At its center stood a device unlike anything George had ever seen. "What is it?" Vex breathed, her usually confident voice tinged with awe. Before George could respond, Lyra's voice came through their communicators. "It's the Ambrosia Nexus," she said, her tone reverent. "An ancient Aridian artifact capable of stabilizing and amplifying ambrosia energy on a massive scale." George approached the device, feeling the energy pulsing around it. "This could be the solution we need, but how do we activate it?" Lyra's response was immediate. "The activation sequence is complex, and it requires a significant amount of pure, unprocessed ambrosia." George's mind was already formulating a plan. "We'll need to go to Iridia 4 to obtain the raw ambrosia. I'll lead a small team, myself, Petra, and Captain Zara. Her ship is our best chance for a covert mission." As they prepared for the expedition, George noticed the tension between Vex and Lyra. Both expressed concern about his growing closeness to Captain Zara, but there was no time to address their worries. The journey to Iridia 4 was fraught with danger. The planet's security had been tightened following the recent political upheaval, forcing them to rely on Captain Zara's expertise in covert operations. They infiltrated a remote ambrosia processing facility, moving silently through dimly lit corridors. George's enhanced abilities proved crucial as they extracted the pure ambrosia, his body resonating with the raw energy of the substance. As they prepared to leave, a voice rang out, "Stop right there!" George turned to see a group of Aridian separatists led by a charismatic figure he recognized from news broadcasts. Karn, the rebel leader, stood before them, his eyes blazing with fury. "George Haverton," Karn spat, "the off-worlder who dares to steal our planet's lifeblood. You're a traitor to Iridia." George raised his hands placatingly. "Karn, please. We're not here to harm anyone. This ambrosia could benefit all of us." Karn's response was to lunge forward, attempting to seize the container of pure ambrosia. In the struggle that ensued, George was forced to use his ambrosia manipulation abilities openly. A surge of energy flowed from his hands, pushing Karn and his followers back. "Go!" George shouted to Petra and Captain Zara. They ran for the exit, alarms blaring around them. Captain Zara's piloting skills were put to the test as they fled the planet, evading Aridian security forces. The ship rattled and shook as they pushed it to its limits, finally breaking free of the planet's atmosphere. Upon their return to the station, they found it in a state of controlled chaos. The reactor's instability had worsened, causing power fluctuations throughout the structure. With no time to lose, George led the effort to activate the Ambrosia Nexus. As he interfaced with the ancient device, his body began to react strongly to the concentrated ambrosia energy. Pain coursed through him, but he pushed through, drawing upon reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed. Petra, Vex, Lyra, and Captain Zara worked in unison, supporting George and stabilizing the energy flow. The activation sequence pushed George to his limits, his consciousness expanding as he merged with the station's systems. Suddenly, a wave of ambrosia energy swept through the station. George felt it wash over him, amplifying his abilities to new heights. He sensed the surge affecting others as well, enhancing the latent abilities of those already exposed to ambrosia and inducing a shared sensation of heightened awareness among all inhabitants. As the energy subsided, George opened his eyes to find the station transformed. The immediate crisis had been averted, but new challenges lay before them. Previously hidden sections of the station had been revealed, and long-dormant systems had come online. George turned to his team, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. "We've got work to do," he said, gesturing to the newly accessible areas. "Let's find out what other secrets this station is hiding." As they set off to explore, George couldn't help but wonder about the repercussions of their actions on Iridia 4. The diplomatic delegation was due to arrive soon, and news of their confrontation with the Separatists would undoubtedly complicate matters. The true test of their abilities and their unity was yet to come. But for now they had a more immediate concern. The newly revealed sections of the space station demanded their attention. As George led the team through the previously hidden corridors, their footsteps echoed in the eerie silence. The walls, smooth and featureless, seemed to absorb the light from their handheld devices. Petra's enhanced senses were on high alert, picking up minute vibrations and energy signatures that others might miss. "There's something big up ahead," she murmured, her eyes narrowing as she focused on a faint pulsing sensation. They rounded a corner and found themselves at the entrance of a vast chamber. As they stepped inside, their lights revealed rows upon rows of cylindrical structures, each about the size of a person. "Stasis pods," Vex breathed, her voice a mixture of awe and trepidation. George moved closer to examine the nearest pod. Most were dark and lifeless, but a handful emitted a soft, pulsating glow. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, he approached one of the active pods. With a gentle swipe of his hand, he cleared away a layer of condensation from its surface. His breath caught in his throat. Inside the pod lay a Aridian female of breathtaking beauty. Her features were delicate yet strong, her skin a deep violet that seemed to shimmer even in suspended animation. "Look at this," Lyra called out, her fingers dancing over a nearby console. "According to these records, this is Nyara, a renowned Aridian scientist from thousands of years ago." Captain Zara leaned in, her color-shifting eyes scanning the readout. "It says she was working on advanced ambrosia research before being placed in stasis due to some kind of crisis." George's mind raced with the possibilities. Her knowledge could be invaluable to our work here. We need to wake her up. As the team prepared for the revival process, the air in the chamber grew thick with tension. George placed his hand on the pod's control panel, channeling a small amount of ambrosia energy to initiate the awakening sequence. Suddenly, the station shuddered. The ambrosia nexus, as if responding to Nyara's imminent awakening, released a surge of energy that coursed through the entire structure. George felt the power wash over him, amplifying his abilities to new heights. Around him, his companions gasped and stumbled as they too experienced an enhancement of their ambrosia-induced capabilities. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor. As it cleared, Nyara's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of deep, swirling amber. She sat up slowly, her gaze immediately locking onto George. When am I?" she asked, her voice melodious despite the confusion evident in her tone. George stepped forward, offering his hand. "You're safe, Nyara. My name is George Haverton. You've been in stasis for a very long time." As Nyara took his hand, a jolt of energy passed between them. George felt an instant connection, a sense of kinship that transcended their different origins. Nyara's eyes widened, clearly feeling the same connection. You're not Aridian," she observed, studying his features intently. "And yet I sense the ambrosia energy within you. How is this possible?" Before George could respond, another tremor shook the station. Petra's voice cut through the moment, urgent and focused. "George, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up an incoming fleet." The team rushed back to the command hub, Nyara following close behind. As they entered, the main display lit up with a tactical readout of the approaching ships. "It's a mix of human and Aridian designs," Vex reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "They're not responding to our hails." Captain Zara leaned in, her expression grim. "I recognize some of those configurations. They're extremists, opposed to the Ambrosia research project." As if on cue, a transmission cut through their communications. A striking figure appeared on the screen, a human Aridian hybrid with piercing eyes and an air of charismatic authority. "I am Cax Zorn," the figure announced, his voice smooth yet tinged with steel. "We demand the immediate surrender of this station and all ambrosia-related research. Comply or face the consequences." George's mind raced, acutely aware of the diplomatic delegation due to arrive at any moment. They needed to protect the station and its inhabitants while also presenting a united front to the incoming officials. Nyara stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. I may have a solution, she said, her voice calm and assured. The ambrosia nexus. We can use it to create a protective barrier around the station. How? George asked, intrigued but cautious. Niara turned to him, her gaze intense. It requires a delicate manipulation of energy, one that only someone with your unique physiology can manage. But I must warn you, the process could accelerate the changes you're already experiencing. George felt the weight of all eyes upon him. The attraction between him and Niara, fueled by their shared affinity for ambrosia energy, added another layer of complexity to his decision. He was acutely aware of the tension radiating from Petra, Vex, and Lyra, their complex feelings for him now compounded by Niara's presence. With Cax Zorn's fleet closing in and time running out, George made his choice. Let's do it, he said, his voice firm with grit. As they prepared the specially designed chamber connected to the ambrosia nexus, George couldn't help but notice the worried glances exchanged by his companions. Captain Zara, initially wary of Niara, now worked alongside her with grudging respect, their shared goal overriding any lingering suspicion. George stepped into the chamber, the air around him crackling with potential energy. As Niara initiated the sequence, he felt the ambrosia power surge through him. His skin began to tingle, taking on a more pronounced Aridian-like texture and coloration. Outside the station, Cax Zorn's fleet moved into attack position. On the distant horizon, the diplomatic delegation's ships appeared, unaware of the brewing conflict. Inside the chamber, George focused all his concentration on channeling the ambrosia nexus's energy, fighting to erect the protective barrier that would determine the fate of the station, the Ambrosia Project, and perhaps his very humanity. As George channeled the immense energy of the ambrosia nexus, he felt his body changing at a molecular level. The tingling sensation in his skin intensified, spreading across his entire form. He watched in fascination as patches of iridescent scales formed along his arms and torso, giving him a distinctly Aridian appearance. The protective barrier began to materialize around the space station, shimmering with a translucent amber glow. George's consciousness expanded, allowing him to perceive the entire station and its inhabitants simultaneously. He sensed every corridor, every room, and every person within the structure. With this heightened awareness, George fine-tuned the barrier's strength and composition. He felt the energy flowing through him, adjusting its distribution to create an impenetrable shield. Outside the station, Cax Zorn's extremist fleet opened fire. The impact of their weapons reverberated through George's being. Each hit caused the shield to ripple and pulse, but George adapted quickly, reinforcing weak points and redirecting energy to absorb the attacks. Incredible, Niara breathed, her eyes fixed on the readouts displaying the barrier's effectiveness. The shield is holding. Captain Zara's voice crackled over the intercom. Diplomatic delegation incoming. They're caught between Zorn's fleet and our barrier. George perceived the approaching ships through the barrier, sensing their confusion and alarm. He created a small opening, allowing Ambassador Henderson's vessels to slip through to safety. As the battle raged, Niara worked feverishly at the Ambrosia Nexus controls. Her fingers danced across the ancient interface, stabilizing the energy flow to prevent a catastrophic overload. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she pushed her own abilities to the limit. George, she called out, her voice strained. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the station. The ambrosia is affecting the crew. Through his expanded consciousness, George sensed the changes occurring in the station's inhabitants. Non-Aridian crew members experienced sudden bursts of accelerated healing, their minds racing with newfound cognitive abilities. Some panicked, their thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and confusion. Others embraced the changes, their excitement palpable in the air. Petra's voice cut through the chaos. George, we've got a problem. Zorn's deploying some kind of drones. They're trying to penetrate the barrier. George shifted his focus, creating localized energy vortexes within the shield. He watched as the small, agile drones were caught in these swirling traps, their ambrosia-disrupting technology rendered useless. The strain of maintaining the barrier while countering these new threats took its toll. George felt his physical form becoming increasingly fluid, shifting between human and Aridian characteristics. He struggled to maintain control, his consciousness threatening to disperse into the vast energy field surrounding the station. Suddenly, a new presence entered his awareness. The diplomatic ships had formed a protective screen between the station and Zorn's fleet. George sensed Ambassador Henderson's grit, the human diplomat's mind a beacon of calm amid the chaos. Taking advantage of this moment of respite, Niara initiated her daring plan. "I'm reconfiguring the nexus," she announced, preparing to emit a wide-range, low-intensity ambrosia field. As the field extended beyond the barrier, George felt its subtle influence on the crews of all affected vessels. The aggression and fear that had permeated the battle began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of empathy and understanding. George's attention was drawn to Cax Zorn. The hybrid leader's mind burned bright in George's perception, a swirling storm of conflicting emotions. As the ambrosia field took effect, George sensed a shift in Zorn's thoughts, a moment of clarity cutting through his zealotry. Seizing this opportunity, George extended his consciousness, establishing a telepathic link with Zorn. Images flowed between them. George's experiences with the ambrosia, the potential for cooperation between species, the hope for a peaceful future. Zorn's mental defenses crumbled under the onslaught of shared understanding. As the immediate threat of violence subsided, George became aware of new complications. The diplomatic delegation, now exposed to the ambrosia field, was experiencing the first stages of physiological change. Ambassador Henderson's thoughts were a tangle of duty and newfound insight, his loyalties tested by this unexpected development. George maintained his connection to the ambrosia nexus, holding the protective barrier in place. His body continued to shift and change, neither fully human nor Aridian. Through the barrier, he sensed the extremist fleet's weapons powering down, Zorn's order to cease fire spreading through the ranks. The space around the station hummed with potential energy, the ambrosia field creating a delicate balance between all parties involved. George knew that this moment of equilibrium was fragile, the future of interspecies relations hanging by a thread. As he held this precarious peace, George felt a new presence approaching. A ship, unlike any he had encountered before, emerged from the depths of space. Its energy signature pulsed with ancient power, resonating with the ambrosia field in ways that defied explanation. George's mind raced with questions. Who were these new arrivals? How would their presence affect the delicate situation unfolding around the station? As the unknown ship drew closer, he braced himself for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the true test of their abilities and unity was just beginning. As the unknown ship drew closer, George's senses sharpened, his consciousness expanding further into the ambrosia-infused space surrounding the station. Suddenly, a surge of energy coursed through the ambrosia nexus, overwhelming George's already heightened perceptions. He gasped, his body convulsing as the raw power flowed through him. The chamber around him crackled with electricity, and Niara rushed to stabilize the systems. "George!" she called out, her fingers flying over the controls. "The ambrosia field is intensifying. It's affecting everyone on the station." As the energy surge subsided, George opened his eyes, blinking in astonishment. His vision had sharpened, revealing previously invisible spectra of light. He looked down at his hands, watching in fascination, as his skin shifted between human and Aridian textures, finally settling into a harmonious blend of both. I feel different," he said, his voice resonating with newfound depth. Niara approached him, her own body shimmering with a subtle amber glow. "The ambrosia has accelerated our evolution," she explained, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can sense the energy at a molecular level now." Throughout the station, crew members and visitors alike experienced their own transformations. In the command hub, Petra stumbled as her hands passed through a control panel, only to solidify again a moment later. Vex lifted a heavy piece of equipment with ease, her muscles rippling with newfound strength. Lyra clutched her head, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of thoughts from everyone on board. Captain Zara's voice crackled over the intercom, tinged with a new authority. "All personnel, report to your stations. We're experiencing unprecedented phenomena across the entire facility." As George and Niara made their way to the main conference room, they encountered Ambassador Henderson and his delegation. The human diplomats now sported faint Aridian markings on their skin, while their Aridian counterparts exhibited enhanced cognitive abilities, processing complex information with remarkable speed. "Mr. Haverden," Henderson called out, his voice a mix of awe and concern. "What's happening to us?" Before George could respond, a familiar face appeared at the end of the corridor. Cax Zorn, flanked by a small group of his followers, approached with cautious steps. "We come in peace," Zorn announced, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. "The energy field, it's changed us, changed our perspective. We seek understanding now, not conflict." George nodded, sensing the sincerity in Zorn's words. "Join us in the conference room. We have much to discuss." As the diverse group assembled, the station hummed with energy. George stood at the head of the table, his hybrid form a physical manifestation of the changes affecting them all. "We stand at a crossroads," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his newfound power. "The ambrosia has given us a unique opportunity to bridge the gap between our species. I propose we form an interspecies council to guide the development and application of this technology." The room buzzed with excited murmurs, the shared consciousness fostered by the ambrosia field allowing for an unprecedented level of understanding and empathy among the delegates. As discussions progressed, Captain Zara entered the room, her bearing even more commanding than before. "We've detected unusual activity in a previously dormant section of the station," she reported. "A hidden chamber has opened." Led by George and Niara, the group made their way to the newly revealed room. Inside, they found an ancient device pulsing with amber light. "The Ambrosia Codex," Niara breathed, her eyes wide with recognition. "A repository of all Aridian knowledge regarding ambrosia cultivation and application." As George and Niara began to examine the codex, its interface responding to their hybrid physiologies, the station's long-range sensors blared an urgent warning. "Incoming anomaly detected," Vex announced, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process the data at incredible speed. "It appears to be a massive, ambrosia-rich nebula entering the system." The assembled group watched in awe as the swirling golden cloud appeared on the main view screen. As it drew closer, the station's systems began to fluctuate, and everyone on board felt a new wave of changes rippling through their bodies. George turned to the newly formed council, his expression grave yet determined. "We face a new challenge," he said, gesturing toward the approaching nebula, "one that will test the limits of our newfound abilities and cooperation. But together, I believe we can harness this phenomenon and unlock the true potential of ambrosia technology." As the nebula's tendrils began to envelop the station, George felt his connection to the ambrosia nexus growing stronger. He reached out with his mind, attempting to interface with the vast energy field surrounding them. The adventure that lay ahead promised to push the boundaries of their evolving forms and the very nature of their existence. As the nebula's golden tendrils reached out to embrace the station, George felt a surge of energy coursing through his newly stabilized hybrid form. The ambrosia nexus pulsed with renewed vigor, its systems struggling to adapt to the influx of concentrated ambrosia energy. "Niara, are you seeing this?" George called out, his voice tinged with awe and concern. Niara's eyes were fixed on the readouts before her, her fingers dancing across the ancient interface with inhuman speed. "The nebula's composition is unlike anything we've encountered before. It's pure, concentrated ambrosia energy." As the nebula's influence spread throughout the station, its effects on the inhabitants became increasingly pronounced. Ambassador Henderson stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. George watched in fascination as the diplomat's skin took on a subtle iridescent sheen, his eyes widening with newfound clarity. "My God," Henderson breathed, flexing his fingers as if seeing them for the first time. I can sense everything around me." Similar transformations rippled through the assembled group. The Aridian representatives gasped in unison as latent abilities awakened within them. Objects began to float and spin in the air around them, their newfound telekinetic powers manifesting in bursts of uncontrolled energy. Amidst the chaos, alarms blared to life. Captain Zara's voice cut through the commotion. Engineering reports critical fluctuations in the stasis pod systems. The dormant Aridians are at risk. George and Nyara exchanged a determined look. We need to stabilize those pods, George said, already moving towards the door. If they fail, we could have a full-scale disaster on our hands. As they raced through the corridors, George couldn't help but notice the changes in Nyara. Her movements were more fluid, her skin shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with his own. He felt drawn to her in a way that transcended physical attraction, their hybrid physiologies resonating on a cellular level. They burst into the stasis chamber, greeted by the sight of hundreds of ancient sleep pods flickering and sparking with uncontrolled energy. Nyara immediately began interfacing with the system, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to process the complex data at lightning speed. The nebula's energy is overloading the pod's containment field, she reported, her voice tight with concentration. We need to reroute power and create a buffer to protect the occupants. George placed his hands on the central control panel, closing his eyes as he reached out with his mind. He could feel the ebb and flow of ambrosia energy throughout the station, the delicate balance now threatened by the nebula's overwhelming presence. With careful precision, he began to manipulate the energy currents, creating a protective cocoon around the stasis pods. As they worked feverishly to contain the crisis, a new presence entered the chamber. Cax Zorn strode forward, his body radiating with impossibly strong power. The former extremist leader's eyes glowed with an inner fire as he approached the failing stasis pods. I can help, Zorn declared, his voice resonating with newfound authority. My body, it's changed. I can absorb and redirect the excess energy. Without waiting for a response, Zorn stretched out his hands toward the nearest pod. Arcs of golden energy leapt from the containment field, flowing into Zorn's body. His skin crackled with power as he channeled the absorbed energy, redirecting it to stabilize the fluctuating systems. Working in tandem, George, Nyara, and Zorn managed to bring the stasis pods back under control. As the last alarm fell silent, they stood back, panting with exertion and marveling at what they had accomplished. That was, George began, searching for words to describe the experience. Incredible, Nyara finished, her eyes meeting his with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Before they could catch their breath, Captain Zara's voice crackled over the intercom once more. All senior personnel to the command hub immediately. We have a new situation developing. Exchanging worried glances, the trio made their way to the station's nerve center. They found it bustling with activity, the air thick with tension and excitement. Petra, Vex, and Lyra were coordinating efforts between various factions, their own enhanced abilities evident in the seamless efficiency of their actions. Captain Zara stood at the center of it all, her commanding presence amplified by the Ambrosia's effects. The nebula's gravitational pull is affecting our orbit, she announced as George and the others entered. We're being drawn in, and our options are limited. As if in response to her words, the entire station shuddered. Ancient systems, dormant for millennia, suddenly flared to life. Panels slid open, revealing controls and displays that had been hidden since the station's creation. The propulsion systems, Nyara gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. They're activating. George felt the surge of power coursing through the station's superstructure. The Ambrosia nexus hummed with renewed energy, connecting to systems that had long lain dormant. He realized with a start that the station itself was responding to the threat, awakening long-forgotten defenses and capabilities. As the engineering team scrambled to understand and control these newly awakened systems, more hidden chambers revealed themselves throughout the station. Reports flooded in of vast hydroponics bays filled with ancient Aridian plants, now stirring to life after eons of stasis. The Interspecies Council, hastily assembled in the command hub, debated furiously over their next course of action. Some argued for using the newly awakened propulsion systems to move the station away from the nebula, while others saw this as an opportunity to fully embrace the transformation and merge with the ambrosia-rich phenomenon. Amidst the heated discussion, a new transmission cut through the chaos. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the concerned faces of officials from both Earth and Iridia Refor. The news of the nebula and the ongoing changes at the station had reached both homeworlds, and they demanded answers. As the various factions argued and debated, George found his gaze drawn to the swirling golden mass visible through the station's viewports. The nebula pulsed with possibility, promising untold secrets and potential. Yet it also brought with it great risk and uncertainty. He felt Niara's presence at his side, their bodies unconsciously aligning as they faced the unknown together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever mysteries the nebula held, George knew that they would face them as one, human, Aridian, and something entirely new. The station trembled again, ancient systems awakening further as the nebula's influence grew stronger. George took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever came next. The true test of their newfound abilities and unity was just beginning, and the fate of not just the station, but potentially two civilizations hung in the balance. Balance. The station shuddered violently, ancient systems groaning under the strain of the approaching nebula. George stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console as the floor beneath him trembled. "Status report!" Captain Zara called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of the command hub. "The nebula's gravitational pull is intensifying," Vex responded, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process the flood of incoming data. "Our orbit is destabilizing. At this rate, we'll be drawn in within hours." As if in response to the dire situation, the station's newly awakened propulsion systems surged to life. The entire structure vibrated with barely held-back energy as dormant engines fought to maintain their position. George felt a wave of concentrated ambrosia energy wash over him, emanating from the nexus. His skin tingled, and he watched in fascination as bioluminescent patches began to form, pulsing in sync with the station's energy fluctuations. The sensation was overwhelming, his connection to the ambrosia nexus suddenly magnified tenfold. "Niara," he called out, reaching for her instinctively. "Are you feeling this?" Niara turned to him, her violet skin now shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. "It's incredible," she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can sense the energy fields all around us." As they watched, Niara's hands began to glow with a soft, purple light. She raised them experimentally, and a shimmering force field sprang into existence, enveloping a nearby console that was sparking dangerously. "Fascinating," Ambassador Henderson remarked, his voice deeper and more resonant than before. George turned to see that the human diplomat's features had shifted, taking on subtle Aridian characteristics. His limbs appeared slightly elongated, and his eyes gleamed with enhanced night vision. Similar changes were rippling through the assembled group. The Aridian representatives gasped in unison as their psionic abilities surged. Objects floated in the air around them, and George could sense the faint buzz of telepathic communication. Amidst the chaos, an alarm blared from the stasis pod chamber. Captain Zara's voice crackled over the intercom. "Medical team to Stasis Bay immediately. We have an unauthorized awakening." George and Niara exchanged a quick glance before racing toward the chamber. As they entered, they saw one of the malfunctioning pods hissing open, its occupants stirring weakly. "It can't be," Niara whispered, her voice filled with shock and recognition. "Zara!" The figure in the pod, a Aridian female bearing a striking resemblance to Niara, struggled to sit up. George and Niara rushed to her side, using their enhanced abilities to stabilize her condition. When am I?" Zara asked, her voice weak from millennia of disuse. "You're safe," George assured her, channeling soothing ambrosia energy through his touch. "But things have changed quite a bit since you went into stasis." As Zara regained her strength, her eyes widened with recognition. "Niara, is it really you?" The sisters embraced, their reunion overshadowed by the urgency of their situation. As Zara's mind cleared, she took in the transformed state of her surroundings and the changes in George and Niara. "The nebula," she said suddenly, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "It's returned." Before they could question her further, the station rocked with another violent tremor. Captain Zara's voice echoed through the facility. "All personnel, brace for impact. We're detecting massive energy surges from the nebula." George reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling the approaching wave of ambrosia energy. Without thinking, he stretched out his hands, drawing upon the power of the nexus. Streams of golden energy flowed from his fingertips, forming a protective barrier around the chamber. Nyara joined him, her newly discovered force field abilities complementing his efforts. Together they managed to deflect the worst of the energy surge, but the strain was immense. As the surge subsided, Cax Zorn burst into the chamber, his body crackling with absorbed energy. "Let me help," he said, stepping forward to join George and Nyara. With his ability to redirect ambrosia energy, they were able to create a more stable buffer around the station's critical systems. The momentary respite allowed them to regroup in the command hub. The Interspecies Council had assembled, their debate growing heated as they discussed their next move. "We must attempt communication with the nebula entity," one faction argued. "This could be a chance for unprecedented scientific discovery." "It's too risky," others countered. "We need to focus on maintaining a safe distance and protecting our people." The argument was cut short as the long-range sensors blared another warning. Captain Zara, who had just returned from an expedition to the nebula's outer edges, strode into the hub. "We've detected multiple ships approaching from various vectors," she announced grimly. "And that's not all. We've discovered ancient Aridian beacons hidden within the nebula. They seem to be part of a vast network, possibly designed to harness and distribute ambrosia energy across the galaxy." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled group. As they grappled with the implications, Zara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with ancient knowledge. "The nebula is not just a natural phenomenon," she explained. "It's a sentient entity, one that my people encountered millennia ago. It was the catalyst for our civilization's great leap forward." The hydroponics bay, now visible on one of the hub's monitors, showed a riot of rapidly evolving Aridian plants. Some offered hope with their medicinal properties, while others had developed aggressive tendencies, requiring constant containment. As the council debated their next move, a massive energy surge from the nebula entity engulfed the station. The ambrosia nexus pulsed with blinding intensity, channeling the energy throughout the structure. George, Nyara, and Zara instinctively combined their abilities, working in harmony to direct and stabilize the flow. As they fought to prevent a catastrophic overload, previously dormant systems throughout the station roared to life. Walls shifted, hidden compartments revealed themselves, and ancient technology hummed with renewed purpose. The true nature of the station became clear. It was an arc ship designed by the ancient Iridians to traverse ambrosia-rich regions of space. As the energy surge subsided, George found himself standing at the heart of the newly awakened arc ship. The assembled council looked to him, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation. The decisions they would make in the coming moments would shape the future of not just their expedition, but potentially the entire galaxy. The approaching ships drew ever closer, their intentions unknown. The nebula entity pulsed with ancient power, offering both promise and peril. And at the center of it all stood George, his hybrid nature a bridge between worlds, poised to guide them in an uncertain future. The approaching ships loomed ever closer on the displays, their intentions still unknown. Suddenly, the entire station shuddered violently, ancient systems groaning under the strain of a massive energy surge. George stumbled, bracing himself against a nearby console as the floor beneath him trembled. The air crackled with electricity, and he felt a wave of concentrated ambrosia energy wash over him, emanating from the nexus. His skin tingled intensely, and he watched in fascination as bioluminescent patches began to form across his body, pulsing in sync with the station's energy fluctuations. The sensation was overwhelming, his connection to the ambrosia nexus magnified tenfold. "Nyara," he called out, reaching for her instinctively. "Are you feeling this?" Nyara turned to him, her violet skin now shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. "It's incredible," she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can sense the energy fields all around us." As they watched, Nyara's hands began to glow with a soft purple light. She raised them experimentally, and a shimmering force field sprang into existence, enveloping a nearby console that was sparking dangerously. Similar changes rippled through the assembled group. The Aridian representatives gasped in unison as their psionic abilities surged. Objects floated in the air around them, and George could sense the faint buzz of telepathic communication. Captain Zara's voice cut through the chaos. All personnel, brace for impact. We're detecting massive energy surges from the nebula. George reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling the approaching wave of ambrosia energy. Without thinking, he stretched out his hands, drawing upon the power of the nexus. Streams of golden energy flowed from his fingertips, forming a protective barrier around the command hub. Nyara joined him, her newly discovered force field abilities complementing his efforts. Together, they managed to deflect the worst of the energy surge, but the strain was immense. As the surge subsided, Cax Zorn burst into the hub, his body crackling with absorbed energy. "Let me help," he said, stepping forward to join George and Nyara. With his ability to redirect ambrosia energy, they were able to create a more stable buffer around the station's critical systems. The momentary respite allowed them to regroup. The Interspecies Council had assembled, their debate growing heated as they discussed their next move. However, their argument was cut short as the long-range sensors blared another warning. "Multiple ships approaching from various vectors," announced one of the technicians, her voice tight with tension. Captain Zara strode into the hub, her expression grim. "We've detected ancient Aridian beacons hidden within the nebula," she reported. "They seem to be part of a vast network, possibly designed to harness and distribute ambrosia energy across the galaxy." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled group. As they grappled with the implications, Zara, the newly awakened Aridian from the stasis pod, stepped forward. Her eyes blazed with ancient knowledge as she spoke. "The nebula is not just a natural phenomenon," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "It's a sentient entity, one that my people encountered ages ago. It was the catalyst for our civilization's great leap forward." As if in response to her words, a massive energy surge from the nebula entity engulfed the station. The ambrosia nexus pulsed with blinding intensity, channeling the energy throughout the structure. George, Nyara, and Zara instinctively combined their abilities, working in harmony to direct and stabilize the flow. As they fought to prevent a catastrophic overload, previously dormant systems throughout the station roared to life. Walls shifted, hidden compartments revealed themselves, and ancient technology hummed with renewed purpose. The true nature of the station became clear. It was an arc ship, designed by the ancient Aridians to traverse ambrosia-rich regions of space. The surge of energy triggered a station-wide transformation. Corridors reshaped themselves, forming new chambers and passageways infused with living ambrosia. The hydroponics bay, visible on one of the hub's monitors, exploded with growth. Iridian plants merged with the station's structure, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem. Non-essential systems were seamlessly replaced by organic alternatives, powered directly by the ambient ambrosia field. In the midst of this chaos, George experienced a moment of clarity. His connection to the ambrosia nexus allowed him to perceive the nebula entity's true nature. He realized that it was not just a cosmic phenomenon, but a vast, collective consciousness composed of countless ancient beings who had merged with ambrosia energy over millennia. "It's trying to communicate with us," George gasped, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain his focus. "The entity, it sees us as potential new additions to its collective." Before he could elaborate further, the intense ambrosia exposure began to overwhelm his hybrid physiology. His body started to lose cohesion, shifting between solid and energy states. Nyara, witnessing George's struggle, rushed to his side, using her own abilities to help stabilize his form. As Nyara worked to anchor George, their energies intermingled, creating a localized ambrosia reaction. This unexpected union caught the attention of both the nebula entity and the approaching ships. The largest of the vessels, now within visual range, revealed itself to be a massive ship belonging to the Ambrosia Seekers, an ancient order dedicated to unlocking the secrets of ambrosia energy. A transmission cut through the static, and a statuesque alien female with crystalline skin appeared on the main view screen. "This is High Seeker Zandora of the Ambrosia Seekers," she announced, her voice resonating with otherworldly power. "We request permission to dock with your station. The events unfolding here may hold the key to transcendent evolution for all sentient life in the galaxy." As the Seekers' ship drew closer, the station's ambrosia field intensified further. Ambassador Henderson and the human diplomats found their bodies adapting to the ambrosia-rich environment, developing limited shape-shifting abilities. The Aridian representatives experienced a surge in their psionic powers, gaining the ability to project their consciousnesses beyond their physical forms. Cax Zorn, his ambrosia absorption abilities pushed to the limit, became a living conduit for the station's excess energy. His body transformed into a being of pure energy, capable of moving through the station's systems at will. The Interspecies Council, now joined by Captain Zara and the newly awakened Zara, debated furiously over whether to allow the Ambrosia Seekers aboard. The risks were enormous, but the potential benefits could not be ignored. As they argued, the station's newly evolved systems detected a growing instability within the nebula entity. The massive influx of energy required to maintain the cocoon around the station was causing the entity to fragment. If this process continued unchecked, it could lead to the destruction of both the nebula and the station. George, slowly regaining control of his form with Nyara's help, realized that they were running out of time. They needed to find a way to stabilize the nebula entity while also protecting the station and its inhabitants. His mind raced, searching for a solution that could save them all from imminent destruction. The fate of the station, its inhabitants, and potentially the future of ambrosia technology throughout the galaxy hung in the balance. As the Council's debate reached a fever pitch, George knew that their next decision would shape the course of history. The question remained, would they embrace the unknown and allow the Ambrosia Seekers to board, or attempt to face this crisis alone? George's mind raced, searching for a solution that could save them all from imminent destruction. In that moment of crisis, an idea crystallized. The Ambrosia Nexus could serve as a bridge between the station and the nebula entity. "We need to stabilize the energy flow," George announced, his voice strained but determined. "Nyara, I need your help." Without hesitation, Nyara stepped closer to George, their partially merged forms pulsing with ambrosia energy. Together, they moved towards the heart of the Nexus, their bodies flickering between solid and energy states. "What are you doing?" Captain Zara called out, her eyes wide with concern. George's response came in short, breathless bursts. "Creating a controlled energy exchange. It's our only chance." As George and Nyara positioned themselves within the Nexus, the station shuddered violently. The nebula entity's fragmentation accelerated, sending waves of chaotic energy crashing against the station's shields. "Brace yourselves," Cax Zorn shouted, his body now a living conduit of pure energy. The process began with a deafening surge of power. Ambrosia energy coursed through George and Nyara, their intertwined forms becoming a conduit for the immense forces at play. Their physical appearances blurred, shifting rapidly between solid and energy states. Nyara gasped, her voice distorted by the energy flowing through her. "George, I can feel the nebula. It's alive." George gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain focus through the overwhelming sensations. "Stay with me, Nyara. We need to guide the energy. Stabilize the connection." Around them, the station continued its transformation. The human diplomats, including Ambassador Henderson, cried out in a mixture of pain and wonder as their bodies began to develop a crystalline structure. Their skin hardened, taking on a translucent, faceted appearance. "Wow, what's happening to us?" Henderson exclaimed, examining his newly transformed hands. Captain Zara, her own body adapting to the enhanced ambrosia environment, quickly assessed the situation. "It seems the energy is changing us all. We need to maintain order and focus on our immediate survival." The Aridian representatives, their psionic abilities amplified beyond imagination, suddenly fell silent. Their eyes glazed over as their minds merged partially with the station systems. One of the Aridians spoke, his voice overlaid with a mechanical undertone. We can access the ship's archives. There's so much knowledge, ancient secrets of our people." As the energy transfer progressed, The cocoon surrounding the station began to stabilize. The wild fluctuations evened out into a steady, pulsating glow. The immediate threat of destruction receded, but the danger was nowhere near the end. Cax Zorn, still in his energy form, found himself drawn inexorably towards the Ambrosia nexus. "I can help regulate the flow," he called out, his voice echoing strangely through the station's systems. "But I'm not sure how long I can maintain my individuality." Captain Zara nodded grimly, turning her attention to the external situation. The approaching ships loomed closer, their intentions still unknown. She began issuing rapid-fire orders to the crew, preparing for any possible confrontation. Suddenly, a new presence made itself known. High Seeker Zandora of the Ambrosia Seekers appeared on the main view screen, her crystalline form resonating with the station's energy field. "Your efforts are admirable," Zandora said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "But allow me to assist. Our combined knowledge may be the key to mastering this power." As Zandora's ship drew closer, attempting to dock with the station, reality itself seemed to warp. Spatial anomalies erupted throughout the structure, merging different sections in impossible ways. Crew members found themselves instantly transported between decks, while objects phased in and out of existence. In the midst of this chaos, a new consciousness stirred within the station's network. The ancient Aridian Ark ship, awakened by the surge of Ambrosia energy, began to assert itself. One of the Aridian representatives gasped, his eyes wide with shock. "The ship! It's alive! It's trying to communicate with us!" As the Ark's consciousness interfaced with the Aridian minds, it shared a startling revelation. The nebula entity was not a natural phenomenon, but the result of an ancient Aridian experiment gone awry, a cosmic-scale ambrosia generator that had spiraled out of control. This knowledge reverberated through the station, adding a new layer of complexity to their already dire situation. The ethical implications of their actions caused great concern on the minds of all present. At the heart of the nexus, George and Niara's merged consciousness began to perceive the vast collective mind of the nebula entity. Glimpses of countless alien civilizations, absorbed over eons, flashed through their minds. "So many voices," Niara whispered, her form flickering wildly. "George, I can't hold on." George fought to maintain their connection, his own sense of self threatening to dissolve into the collective. "Focus on my voice, Niara. We need to stay together." As they struggled to communicate with the entity, to convey the danger of its fragmentation, Cax Zorn's energy form enveloped them, creating a buffer against the overwhelming alien consciousness. The station hung in the balance, caught between destruction and transformation. The immediate threat had been averted, but the challenges ahead loomed large. As the energy transfer continued to reshape the physical and mental landscape of all involved, the fate of the station, its inhabitants, and the future of Ambrosia technology remained uncertain. In the command hub, Captain Zara steeled herself for the decisions to come. The approaching ships, the evolving station, and the awakened Ark consciousness all demanded immediate attention. With a deep breath, she turned to address the assembled crew, ready to face whatever challenges the next moments might bring. With a deep breath, she turned to address the assembled crew, ready to face whatever challenges the next moments might bring. Suddenly, a wave of calm washed over the command hub. George and Niara's merged consciousness began to stabilize, their unique bond forming a bridge between the station's inhabitants and the vast collective mind of the nebula entity. Through this connection, they discovered a way to communicate more effectively, easing the strain on their physical forms. "We've established a link," George's voice echoed through the station's systems, tinged with a mixture of relief and wonder. "The entity is responding to us." Niara's thoughts intertwined with George's, her voice carrying a new depth of understanding. "It's reshaping itself, adapting to our presence." As they spoke, the view outside the station's windows transformed. The chaotic swirls of ambrosia energy coalesced into more defined structures, forming a massive ethereal body around the station. Tendrils of golden light wove intricate patterns, creating a protective cocoon that pulsed with life. Captain Zara watched in awe As the pressure on the station's systems visibly decreased, the alarms that had been blaring incessantly fell silent, replaced by a soft, harmonic hum. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. Cax Zorn, his energy form still intertwined with the station's systems, responded. "The energy flow has stabilized, Captain. The strain on our systems has reduced by 78%. As the immediate crisis subsided, the true extent of the station's transformation became apparent. The living quarters and chambers pulsed with a soft amber glow, nurturing the ongoing changes in the crew. The air itself seemed alive, charged with potential. Ambassador Henderson, his body now a striking blend of human features and crystalline structures, stepped forward. The light refracted off his faceted skin, casting prismatic patterns across the command hub. "Captain," he said, his voice resonating with newfound authority, "I believe it's time we addressed our visitors." Zara nodded, gesturing toward the main view screen. "Open a channel to all ships in the vicinity." Henderson faced the screen, his crystalline form lending an otherworldly gravitas to his words. "This is Ambassador Henderson of the Ambrosia Research Station. We have stabilized our situation and are prepared to discuss recent events. We invite representatives from each ship to join us for diplomatic talks." As Henderson spoke, the hydroponics bay visible on one of the monitors caught Zara's attention. The Aridian plants had transformed the area into a lush jungle, their leaves shimmering with an inner light. Fruits of impossible colors hung heavy on the branches, pulsing with energy. One of the Aridian representatives, his mind still partially merged with the station's systems, spoke up. "Captain, the plants, they're producing fruits with extraordinary properties. Our scans indicate they could accelerate healing and enhance physical abilities." Before Zara could respond, the view screen flickered, revealing the face of High Seeker Zandora. The crystalline alien looked somewhat shaken, but her eyes burned with intensity. "We accept your invitation, Ambassador," Zandora said. "But first I have a proposal. Our sensors detected the unique properties of your station's evolved systems. With your permission, we'd like to assist in creating a series of controlled ambrosia chambers. These would allow for safe, gradual exposure to the energy, offering the benefits of transformation without the risks of uncontrolled change." Zara exchanged glances with Henderson, both recognizing the potential impact of such technology. As they considered the offer, Cax Zorn's voice echoed through the command hub. "Captain, Ambassador," he said, his tone urgent but controlled. "I've found a way to anchor my consciousness by forming a symbiotic relationship with the station's AI. This gives me unprecedented control over the flow of ambrosia energy throughout the structure. I can fine-tune the environment for each inhabitant, optimizing their transformations." The implications of Zorn's discovery sent a ripple of excitement through the assembled crew. Before they could fully process this development, a new alert sounded. "Captain," one of the Aridian representatives called out, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as he interfaced with the station's sensors. "We're detecting a new group of ships entering the system. They appear to be a scientific expedition." Zara quickly brought up the sensor data on her console. "Identify the lead ship," she ordered. After a moment, the Aridian responded, "It's a human vessel, Captain. Registry indicates it's led by Dr. Elena Volkov, a renowned geneticist." As if on cue, a transmission cut through the ambient hum of the station. Dr. Volkov's face appeared on a secondary screen, her eyes wide with a mix of scientific curiosity and hardly restrained excitement. "Ambrosia Research Station, this is Dr. Elena Volkov," she announced, her voice crisp and professional despite the extraordinary circumstances. "We've been monitoring the situation from afar and request permission to dock. Our team is eager to study the effects of ambrosia exposure on various species. We're prepared to offer our expertise in exchange for access to your unique environment." The command hub erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew processed this new development. Zara raised her hand, calling for silence. "It seems we have a lot to discuss," she said, her gaze sweeping across the transformed faces of her crew. "Ambassador Henderson, prepare to receive our guests. Cax Zorn, work with the Aridian representatives to establish safety protocols for any new arrivals. And someone get me a sample of that new fruit from hydroponics." I have a feeling we're going to need all the energy we can get. As the crew sprang into action, Zara turned her attention back to the swirling nebula outside. The ethereal structure surrounding the station pulsed with potential, a visual representation of the unprecedented opportunities and challenges that lay ahead. With a mix of apprehension and purpose, she prepared to lead her crew into this new frontier of exploration and discovery. Transformation. As Captain Zara prepared to address the complex challenges ahead, an urgent alert sounded from the hydroponics bay. "Captain, we have a situation," reported the Aridian botanist, his voice tight with concern. "The ambrosia-infused plants are producing fruits at an unprecedented rate. We can't keep up with the harvest." Zara swiftly made her way to the hydroponics bay, accompanied by Ambassador Henderson and Dr. Volkov. As the doors slid open, they were greeted by a sight that defied imagination. The once orderly rows of plants had transformed into a lush, otherworldly jungle. Fruits of impossible colors and shapes hung heavy on branches that seemed to pulse with energy. "Fascinating," Dr. Volkov breathed, her eyes wide as she scanned the vibrant flora. "The ambrosia energy has accelerated their growth cycle exponentially." Ambassador Henderson reached out to touch one of the fruits, his crystalline fingers refracting light across its surface. "We must be cautious. These fruits, while potentially beneficial, could cause uncontrolled transformations if consumed in large quantities." As if to emphasize his point, a nearby crew member who had been sampling the fruits began to change before their eyes. His skin took on a faint blue hue, and small, iridescent scales began to form along his arms. "We need to contain this," Zara said firmly. "Dr. Volkov, what do you suggest?" The geneticist's mind raced with possibilities. "We could use these fruits to our advantage. If we can isolate and stabilize the ambrosia compounds, we might be able to create a serum to guide and control transformations." Zara nodded, quickly making a decision. "Make it happen, Doctor. Set up a lab and begin work immediately." As Dr. Volkov assembled her team and equipment, George and Niara's merged consciousness resonated through the station systems. Their voices, intertwined and ethereal, echoed in the minds of the crew. "Captain," they said in unison, "we've detected a disturbance within the nebula entity. A crystalline desert environment is expanding rapidly, threatening the balance we've achieved." Zara's enhanced senses immediately tuned into the data flowing through the station. She could feel the growing instability, a discordant note in the otherwise harmonious symbiosis between the station and the nebula entity. "We need to investigate and stabilize this environment," she announced. "Cax Zorn, can you temporarily solidify your form? I want you on the expedition team." Cax's energy coalesced into a humanoid shape, shimmering with almost unchecked power. "I'm ready, Captain." Zara quickly assembled the team, including two of Dr. Volkov's scientists equipped with prototype ambrosia-resistant suits. They made their way to a newly formed airlock that interfaced directly with the nebula entity's created environments. As the airlock cycled open, they stepped into a world of crystalline beauty and danger. The desert stretched out before them, a vast expanse of geometric formations that sparkled and refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. But even as they watched, new crystals erupted from the ground, growing at an alarming rate. "The energy concentration here is off the charts," one of the scientists reported, her voice tight with awe and apprehension. Cax Zorn moved forward, his energy form allowing him to manipulate the crystals. He created a path through the rapidly growing formations, but the effort clearly strained him. His form flickered and wavered, occasionally losing cohesion entirely before snapping back into shape. "We need to move quickly," Zara urged, her enhanced senses picking up the increasing instability of the environment. The source of the disruption must be nearby. As they pressed deeper into the crystalline desert, the growth around them accelerated. Towers of crystal shot up from the ground, forcing the team to constantly adjust their route. The ambrosia-resistant suits of the scientists began to show signs of strain, the material warping and shifting under the intense energy exposure. Back on the station, Ambassador Henderson found himself facing an unexpected diplomatic challenge. A flotilla of sleek, otherworldly ships had arrived at the edge of the nebula, their designs unlike anything in known space. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a being of ethereal beauty. Its form seemed to shift and flow, reminiscent of the nebula itself. "Greetings," the being said, its voice a harmonic melody. "We are the Void Weavers. We have traveled far, drawn by the unique energy signature of your station and this remarkable nebula. We request permission to send a representative to observe and potentially participate in your research." Henderson exchanged glances with the other members of the Interspecies Council. After a brief, silent deliberation, he turned back to the screen. "We welcome you, Void Weavers," he said, his crystalline form lending gravity to his words. "We look forward to the exchange of knowledge and the forging of new alliances." As preparations were made to receive the Void Weaver representative, Dr. Volkov and her team worked feverishly in the newly established laboratory. The surplus of ambrosia-infused fruits provided a wealth of raw material for their experiments. "If we can isolate the key compounds and stabilize them," Dr. Volkov explained to her team, "we should be able to create a serum that allows for controlled, guided transformations." The arrival of Zalara, the Void Weaver representative, caused a stir of excitement and curiosity throughout the station. Her form seemed to shimmer and shift, effortlessly adapting to the ambrosia-rich environment. Dr. Volkov, intrigued by Zalara's unique physiology, invited her to participate in the serum development process. The Void Weaver's innate understanding of energy manipulation proved invaluable, accelerating their progress significantly. Meanwhile, in the Crystalline Desert, Captain Zara and her team finally located the source of the instability. A massive, pulsating crystal formation dominated the landscape, its facets reflecting and refracting the surrounding ambrosia energy in chaotic patterns. "This is it," Zara declared, her enhanced senses confirming the crystal's role in the environment's expansion. "We need to neutralize it, but the process could be dangerous." Cax Zorn stepped forward, his energy form crackling with tenacity. "I can channel the excess energy away from the crystal," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the crystalline landscape. "But it will put a significant strain on my form." As Cax began the delicate process of energy redirection, the two scientists quickly set up containment fields to harness the diverted power. Captain Zara coordinated their efforts, her heightened awareness allowing her to monitor the environment for further instabilities. The crystal's pulsations grew more erratic as Cax siphoned away its excess energy. His form began to flicker violently, phasing in and out of physical existence. The scientists worked furiously to adjust their containment fields, struggling to keep up with the fluctuating energy levels. Back on the station, George and Niara's merged consciousness sensed the disturbance caused by the team's actions. They reached out through the ambrosia nexus, their combined will manifesting as visible ripples of energy throughout the station. Gravity fluctuated, and spatial orientation shifted momentarily as they fought to stabilize the connection between the station and the nebula entity. In the laboratory, Dr. Volkov and Zalara stood over a containment unit, watching as their latest batch of serum interacted with a sample of plant matter. The organic material began to shift and change, its transformation guided by the carefully calibrated ambrosia compounds. "We're close," Dr. Volkov said, her eyes alight with scientific fervor. "Just a few more adjustments, and we should have a viable prototype." As the crisis in the Crystalline Desert reached its peak and the laboratory team neared a breakthrough, the station hung in a precarious balance. The outcome of these simultaneous efforts would shape the future of ambrosia research and the delicate symbiosis between the station and the nebula entity. The crew, transformed and enhanced by their exposure to ambrosia energy, stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in this new frontier of exploration and discovery. As the team in the Crystalline Desert worked to stabilize the volatile environment, a sudden pulse of energy rippled through the station. Captain Zara felt it first, her enhanced senses detecting the surge milliseconds before it hit. "Brace yourselves," she shouted, but her warning came too late. The wave of ambrosia energy washed over them, disrupting their carefully calibrated efforts. Cax Zorn's energy form flickered violently, his control over the crystal's power wavering. The scientists' protective suits crackled and sparked, their displays flashing urgent warnings. "Captain, our suits are failing," one of the scientists cried out. panic evident in his voice. The ambrosia-resistant material began to warp and dissolve, exposing them to the raw energy of the environment. Zara gritted her teeth, fighting against the surge. She could feel her body changing, responding to the concentrated ambrosia radiation. Her skin hardened, taking on a crystalline sheen that spread rapidly across her form. Back on the station, alarms blared as the energy surge triggered a catastrophic chain of events. In the laboratory, Dr. Volkov watched in horror as the containment units holding their experimental serum cracked under the strain. A fine mist of the unstable compound billowed into the air, quickly being drawn into the ventilation system. "Seal the lab," Dr. Volkov shouted, but it was already too late. The serum spread through the station's circulation, carried on currents of recycled air. Zilara, the Void Weaver representative, reacted instantly to the airborne particles. Her ethereal form began to absorb the serum at an alarming rate, causing her body to shift and expand uncontrollably. "I cannot contain it," she gasped, her voice distorting as her form pulsed with raw ambrosia energy. Ambassador Henderson's crystalline fingers flew over the control panels, initiating emergency containment procedures. "Attention all personnel," his voice echoed through the station. "We are sealing off individual sections to contain the spread. Remain where you are and await further instructions." But the station itself seemed to resist their efforts. The organic structure, infused with ambrosia energy, continued to shift and reform. Doorways appeared and disappeared, corridors stretched and twisted, making it nearly impossible to maintain a coherent layout. In the hydroponics bay, the ambrosia-infused plants reacted violently to the energy surge. Vines thickened and lengthened at an impossible speed, breaking through containment barriers and spreading into adjacent sections. The Aridian botanist watched in awe and terror as a jungle sprouted before his eyes, threatening to engulf vital systems. George and Niara, their consciousness still merged through the ambrosia nexus, sensed the impending disaster. With a shared thought, they made a crucial decision. Their connection to the nebula entity wavered and then severed, allowing them to focus their combined will on stabilizing the station's internal systems. Energy rippled through the organic structure of the station, visible waves of power that momentarily altered its physical layout. Crew members stumbled as gravity fluctuated, and spatial orientation shifted, disorienting. In the crystalline desert, Captain Zara knew they had to act fast. Her body continued to crystallize, the transformation spreading across her form. With a surge of willpower, she reached out with her enhanced abilities, attempting to create a localized energy barrier around the unstable crystal formation. The effort was immense, straining her body to its limits. She could feel her very essence being drawn into the forming barrier, her consciousness threatening to disperse into the swirling energy. Cax Zorn, witnessing Zara's struggle, made a split-second decision. He channeled his own energy into the forming barrier, his diffuse form intertwining with Zara's crystalline structure. Together, they created a stable matrix that began to contain the crystal's volatile energy. "Hold on, Captain," Cax's voice echoed, barely audible over the roar of energy. "We can do this together." As the crisis unfolded, Dr. Volkov and her team worked frantically in the contaminated laboratory. The airborne serum had already begun to affect them, their bodies showing signs of accelerated transformation. Dr. Volkov's hands had developed a subtle crystalline structure, enhancing her dexterity, but causing increasing discomfort. "We need to synthesize a neutralizing agent," she said, her voice strained as she fought against the pain of her transformation. "If we can counteract the serum's effects, we might be able to stabilize the station." Outside the station, the fleet of ships surrounding them began to register the effects of the spreading ambrosia energy. Captains reported unusual readings and malfunctions, while some crew members exposed to the radiation showed signs of unexpected changes. In the midst of the chaos, George and Niara's merged consciousness worked tirelessly to regain control. They manipulated the station's ambrosia flow, creating pockets of stability where the energy concentration dropped to manageable levels. These safe zones appeared as islands of calm in the sea of turmoil, offering brief respite to the affected crew members. As their efforts began to take effect, parts of the station reverted to their original, non-organic state. Metal and polymer replaced pulsing, living tissue in some sections, providing a semblance of normality amidst the chaos. In the crystalline desert, as Captain Zara and Cax Zorn struggled to maintain the energy barrier, something unexpected occurred. The neutralized crystal formation began to reshape itself, its facets realigning into a structure that resembled an enormous organic computer core. Zara, her consciousness stretched to its limits, sensed a change in the energy patterns. "Something's happening," she managed to communicate to her team. "The nebula entity, I think it's trying to tell us something." As the massive crystal structure continued to evolve, the expedition team found themselves at the precipice of a new discovery, even as the station behind them grappled with the unfolding crisis. The stage was set for a confrontation between chaos and understanding, with the fate of the Ambrosia Research Station hanging in the balance. Balance. The sudden pulse of energy that had rippled through the station marked a turning point in the crisis. Captain Zara, her body now partially crystallized, focused her enhanced senses on the organic computer core that had formed from the neutralized crystal formation. The structure pulsed with an otherworldly glow, its facets realigning into intricate patterns that seemed to convey meaning. "I'm going to attempt a direct connection," Zara announced, her voice resonating with a crystalline timbre. She pressed her transformed hand against the core's surface, feeling a surge of information flood her consciousness. As Zara interfaced with the core, Dr. Volkov and her team worked frantically in one of the newly stabilized safe zones created by George and Yara's efforts. The organic structure of the station had ceased its chaotic shifting in these areas, allowing the scientists to focus on developing a neutralizing agent for the airborne serum. "We're close," Dr. Volkov said, her crystalline fingers manipulating holographic data displays with unprecedented precision. "The ambrosia compounds are responding to our latest formulation." In the sealed section containing Zilara, the Void Weaver representatives form continued to expand and contort, threatening to breach containment. Ambassador Henderson, observing the critical situation through a view screen, made a snap decision. "I'm going in," he announced, his crystalline form shimmering with drive. "My partial transformation might allow me to stabilize her." As Henderson entered the contaminated area, alarms blared throughout the station. The ambassador approached Zalara's writhing form, extending his hands toward her pulsating energy field. "Zilara, focus on my voice," Henderson called out, his words carrying a resonant power. "Let me help you channel this energy." In the hydroponics bay, the Aridian botanist watched in awe as the rapidly growing plants began to form intricate, circuit-like patterns. Vines and leaves intertwined with the station's systems, creating living conduits for energy and information. "Fascinating," the botanist murmured, recording the phenomenon with his partially transformed sensory organs. "They're not just growing, they're adapting, evolving." Back in the crystalline desert, Cax Zorn felt a sudden shift in his diffuse energy form. He found himself being drawn towards the organic computer core, his consciousness expanding as he merged with the structure. "Captain," Cax's voice echoed, now seeming to emanate from the core itself. "I'm accessing vast stores of knowledge. The nebula entity, it's trying to communicate." As these events unfolded, the fleet surrounding the station reported increasing incidents of crew transformations and equipment malfunctions. Emergency protocols were initiated, and stasis pods containing affected crew members were ejected, drifting toward the station in a cloud of shimmering energy. Dr. Volkov's team completed the neutralizing agent, quickly dispersing it through the station's air filtration system. The spread of the airborne serum halted, but crew members found themselves locked in various stages of transformation. In the crystalline desert, Captain Zara's connection with the organic computer core deepened. Her eyes widened as the nebula entity's intentions became clear. "It's evolving," she gasped, her words strained by the flood of information. "Using us as a template to create a stable form, a new kind of cosmic being." George and Yara, sensing the gravity of the situation, made their decision. They re-established their connection with the nebula entity, their merged consciousness expanding throughout the station. For a brief moment, all inhabitants found themselves linked in a shared mental network. The experience was overwhelming. Human crew members glimpsed millennia of Aridian history, while Aridian representatives felt the rush of human emotions and memories. The exchange created a profound sense of unity and understanding among the station's diverse population. As the shared consciousness faded, the station's organic structure underwent a final transformation. Walls shifted and reformed, incorporating elements of human, Aridian, and nebula entity design. The result was a hybrid structure pulsing with controlled ambrosia energy. In the contaminated section, Ambassador Henderson successfully stabilized Zilara, but at a cost. Their forms had partially merged, creating a unique symbiotic relationship between Voidweaver and human. What have we become? Zilara asked, her voice a blend of two distinct tones. Something new, Henderson replied, marveling at their shared sensations. Something with potential. As the immediate crisis subsided, the station achieved a tentative equilibrium. The hybrid structure hummed with energy, supporting its transformed inhabitants. George and Niara, their consciousness once again individual but forever changed, surveyed the altered landscape of their home. We've crossed a threshold, George said, his form shimmering with residual energy. Niara nodded, her Aridian features now bearing traces of human characteristics. The real work begins now. We must understand what we've become and what it means for our future. In the Crystalline desert, Captain Zara and Kaxorn continued to interface with the organic computer core, sifting through the vast amounts of data being transmitted. The nebula entity's knowledge held secrets that could reshape their understanding of the universe. As the transformed crew members began to adapt to their new forms and abilities, the Interspecies Council convened to discuss the station's future. They faced unprecedented challenges, managing ongoing transformations, handling relations with the surrounding fleet, and exploring the potential of the nebula entity's vast knowledge. The council chamber, now a blend of organic and technological elements, buzzed with energy as representatives from all species gathered. Dr. Volkov, her hands still bearing their crystalline structure, presented her findings on the neutralizing agent and its limitations. We've halted the spread, but reversing the transformations may not be possible, she explained. We need to focus on understanding and controlling these changes. Ambassador Henderson and Zilara, their merged form drawing curious glances, spoke of the diplomatic implications of their new state. We represent a bridge between species, they said in unison. Our unique perspective could be invaluable in future negotiations. As the council debated their next steps, the station pulsed with potential. The crisis had passed, but the journey of discovery was far from finished. New challenges loomed on the horizon, waiting to test the limits of their newfound unity and transformed existence. The Interspecies Council adjourned, leaving the hybrid structure of the conference room humming with residual energy. As the representatives filtered out, George and Nayara lingered, their forms shimmering with the after effects of their recent transformation. We have our work cut out for us, George said, his voice carrying a new resonance that seemed to echo through the station's organic walls. Nyara nodded, her Aridian features now bearing subtle human characteristics. Indeed. Let's start with the hydroponics bay. The reports from the botanist are intriguing. As they made their way through the transformed corridors, crew members of various species and stages of transformation moved about their duties. The station had achieved a tenuous equilibrium, but the air was thick with anticipation of further changes. Upon entering the hydroponics bay, George and Nayara were greeted by a sight that defied their expectations. The Aridian plants, once confined to orderly rows, had transformed into a lush, interconnected network of vines and leaves. At the center of this botanical maze hung clusters of iridescent fruit, pulsing with an inner light that mimicked the ambrosia energy. The Aridian botanist approached them, his partially transformed sensory organs twitching with excitement. "You must see this," he said, plucking one of the fruits and splitting it open. The fruit's interior glowed with an intensity that made George and Nayara instinctively step back. Tendrils of energy curled from the exposed flesh, reaching out before dissipating into the air. "We've run preliminary tests," the botanist explained. "Consumption of these fruits leads to a temporary but significant amplification of ambrosia-induced abilities." It's unlike anything we've seen before. George's eyes widen. This could be a game changer. We need to inform Dr. Volkov immediately. As if on cue, Dr. Volkov entered the hydroponics bay, her crystalline hands glinting under the bay's specialized lighting. I came as soon as I received the initial report, she said, her gaze fixed on the fruit. We need to establish controlled studies right away. The potential applications and risks are enormous. While Dr. Volkov and her team began their analysis, George and Nayara turned their attention to the next pressing matter. They made their way to the station's central hub, where they found Ambassador Henderson and Zilara engaged in deep conversation. The sight of the merged human Voidweaver form still caused a ripple of surprise among the crew, but Henderson and Zilara seemed to have adapted to their new state with remarkable speed. Ambassador, George greeted them. How are you? Both adjusting? Henderson and Zilara spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing in an otherworldly manner. We've reached a decision. We believe our unique form could be the key to establishing meaningful communication with the Voidweaver fleet. Nyara leaned forward, intrigued. You're proposing a diplomatic mission? Precisely, they replied. Our shared consciousness could bridge the gap between our species. It's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. George nodded, his form shimmering as he processed the implications. I'll call an emergency council session. This could be a crucial step in securing allies for our ongoing research. As Henderson and Zilara prepared for their mission, activity on the station intensified. In the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zara and Cax Zorn continued their work with the organic computer core. Their efforts had yielded unexpected results. Zara's partially crystallized form shimmered as she interfaced with the core, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of her physical body. Cax, are you seeing this? She called out, her voice resonating through the crystal structure. Cax's diffuse energy form coalesced nearby. I am. It's remarkable. We're not just accessing data, we're seeing the very fabric of the nebula entity. Before them, holographic representations of swirling energy patterns filled the air. As they watched, pockets of stability began to form within the chaos. We can predict the formation of new environments, Zara realized, her eyes wide with wonder. And not just predict, we might be able to influence their creation. Cax's form pulsed with excitement. Imagine the possibilities. We could create stable, habitable zones within the ambrosia-rich space. It could revolutionize our understanding of cosmic terraforming. As this breakthrough unfolded, George initiated a new project back on the station. He gathered a team of engineers, their forms a mix of organic and crystalline structures, in what was once a standard conference room, but now resembled a living, breathing organism. We need to adapt, George explained, gesturing to the holographic displays showing the station's layout. Our crew is no longer uniform. We need living quarters that can adjust to each individual's unique physiology. The engineering team nodded, their transformed minds already racing with ideas. One of them, a former human whose skin now shimmered with a metallic sheen, spoke up. We could use the station's new organic components to create adaptive environments, temperature, gravity, atmospheric composition, all adjustable at the individual level. George smiled, his form rippling with approval. Exactly. This isn't just about comfort. It's about embracing our new reality and setting the stage for future growth. As the engineers set to work, Nyara found herself in the station's newly established training center. Around her, a diverse group of transformed crew members gathered, each bearing unique adaptations from their exposure to ambrosia energy. What we're about to undertake is unprecedented, Nyara began, her voice carrying a hint of the ambrosia nexus's resonance. We'll be exploring pocket environments within the nebula entity. The ambrosia concentrations will be higher than anything you've experienced before. She paused, looking each trainee in the eye. This isn't just about physical conditioning. We need to train our minds to maintain our sense of self in the face of overwhelming energy. Are you ready? The trainees nodded, their transformed bodies humming with anticipation. Nyara smiled, her Aridian features softening with a touch of human expression. Then let's begin. As the station buzzed with activity, its inhabitants adapting to their new reality, and pushing the boundaries of their transformed existence, no one could have predicted the challenge that was about to emerge from the depths of space. The long-range sensors, their capabilities enhanced by the recent transformations, picked up an anomaly that would soon thrust the station into a new phase of its cosmic adventure. Journey. The long-range sensors, their capabilities enhanced by the recent transformations, picked up an anomaly that would soon thrust the station into a new phase of its cosmic evolution. George and Niara stood before the main control panel, their forms shimmering with anticipation as they prepared to establish long-range communication through the Ambrosia nexus. The approaching Aridian Ark ship loomed large on the holographic display, its ancient hull a stark contrast to the hybrid structure of the station. "Ready?" George asked, his eyes meeting Niara's. She nodded, her partially human features set with perseverance. "Let's make contact." As they initiated the communication sequence, the station's organic components pulsed with energy. The Ambrosia nexus hummed, its power building to unprecedented levels. Suddenly, instead of the expected telepathic link, a surge of Ambrosia energy burst forth from the station. The energy field expanded rapidly, enveloping both the station and the approaching Aridian vessel. George and Niara watched in astonishment as the two structures began to physically merge, drawn together by the pulsing Ambrosia field. "This isn't right," George exclaimed, his hands flying over the controls. "We need to stabilize the—" His words were cut short as the station lurched violently. Corridors twisted and reshaped around them, forming new pathways that connected to the Aridian Ark. Crew members cried out in surprise as they found themselves suddenly transported to unfamiliar sections of the merged structure. In the midst of the chaos, a group of stasis pods from the Ark ship activated. Their lids hissed open, releasing disoriented Aridians who had been in suspended animation for millennia. Among them was Lyra, a Aridian scientist who stumbled out of her pod, her legs weak from prolonged disuse. Lyra blinked rapidly, her eyes adjusting to the light of her new surroundings. The hybrid structure of the station Ark fusion overwhelmed her senses. She stumbled forward, her body tingling with the effects of the concentrated Ambrosia environment. As she rounded a corner, Lyra collided with George, who was working to stabilize a fluctuating power conduit. "Careful," George said, steadying her with his transformed hands. "Are you all right?" Lyra stared at him, her eyes wide with confusion. When am I?" Before George could respond, Dr. Volkov's voice crackled over the station's communication system. "Medical team to all newly merged sections. We have awakened Aridians experiencing rapid physiological changes." In the hydroponics bay, the sentient Aridian plants reacted strongly to the presence of their ancient kin. Vines and leaves expanded at an alarming rate, spreading through ventilation ducts and maintenance shafts. The dense foliage began to obstruct vital systems and block crew movement. Captain Zara and Cax Zorn, still interfaced with the organic computer core in the Crystalline desert, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by a surge of data from the Aridian Ark ship. "The core can't handle this influx," Zara shouted, her partially crystallized form vibrating with the strain. "It's affecting the pocket environments." Cax's energy form pulsed erratically. "We're seeing gravitational anomalies and weather pattern disruptions throughout the nebula entity." Outside the merged station Ark hybrid, Ambassador Henderson and Zilera approached in their shuttle, returning from their diplomatic mission to the Voidweaver fleet. They found themselves unable to dock, forced to navigate through the turbulent Ambrosia field surrounding the structure. "Our hybrid physiology is allowing us to withstand this energy," Henderson and Zilera spoke in unison, their merged forms shifting and adapting as they pushed through the field. "But it's changing us even further." Inside the transform station, George focused his efforts on integrating the Ark ship's ancient Aridian technology with the station's hybrid infrastructure. He worked feverishly, his hands moving with inhuman speed across the merged control systems. "Niara," he called out through the communication system, "we need to establish safe zones throughout the structure. Can you use your connection to the Ambrosia nexus to create stability pockets?" Niara's voice came back, strained but determined. "I'm on it. I'm coordinating rescue efforts for trapped crew members as well." As the chaos continued, the Interspecies Council convened an emergency session, now expanded to include representatives from the awakened Aridians. The council chamber, a fusion of organic and technological elements from both vessels, buzzed with urgent debate. "We need to address the plant growth issue immediately," a human council member insisted. "It's threatening to overwhelm our life support systems." A newly awakened Aridian scientist countered, "Those plants may hold the key to stabilizing our merged environment. We can't simply eradicate them." As the debate raged on, long-range sensors detected multiple anomalies approaching the station's position. The intense concentration of ambrosia energy was attracting the attention of other cosmic entities. George's voice cut through the council chamber. "We've achieved tentative structural stability, but we have a new problem. Unknown entities are converging on our position." The council fell silent, the gravity of their situation sinking in. They had survived the merger, but now faced the prospect of encounters with unknown ambrosia-sensitive beings or phenomena. As the Station Arc hybrid continued to evolve, George and Niara found themselves at the heart of the transformed structure. Their bond, tested by the chaos of the merger, remained strong as they began to formulate a plan. "We need to harness the combined knowledge and technology of both vessels," Niara said, her form shimmering with residual ambrosia energy. George nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the approaching anomalies. "Agreed. It's time to push the boundaries of what we thought possible." Together, they turned to face the unknown, ready to lead their diverse crew into uncharted territories of ambrosia-influenced space. The merged Station Arc hybrid pulsed with potential, its transformed inhabitants poised on the brink of further discovery and transformation. Transformation and adaptation. The merged Station Arc hybrid pulsed with potential, its transformed inhabitants poised on the brink of further discovery and challenges. As the initial chaos subsided, George and Niara turned their attention to the most pressing need, integrating the newly awakened Aridians into their transformed community. They moved swiftly through the twisting corridors, their forms adapting to the ever-changing environment. "We need to establish a secure living area for our new arrivals," George said, his voice resonating through the organic walls. "The eastern section of the merged structure seems the most stable." Niara nodded, her partially human features set with concentration. "I'll coordinate with the engineering teams to adapt the space. We'll need to account for their unique physiological needs." As they worked, Dr. Volkov's voice crackled over the communication system. "Medical team, report to Section E7. We're setting up a triage center for the Aridians experiencing rapid changes." In the newly designated living quarters, Lyra, the awakened Aridian scientist, stood before a complex array of holographic displays. Her fingers danced across the interface, decoding streams of data from the Ark ship's ancient databanks. "This is remarkable," she murmured, her eyes wide with wonder. "George, look at this. Our ancestors developed techniques for manipulating ambrosia energy that we never imagined possible." George moved to her side, his transformed senses allowing him to process the data at an inhuman speed. "These could be the key to stabilizing our merged structure and managing the nebula entity's effects." As they delved deeper into the Ark's secrets, a hidden chamber revealed itself. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with prototype devices, their surfaces etched with intricate Aridian symbols. "Controlled ambrosia infusion devices," Lyra breathed, her hands hovering over the nearest machine. "With these, we could potentially harness the nebula's energy in ways we've only dreamed of." Meanwhile, in the hydroponics bay, Niara led a team of engineers and botanists in a delicate dance with the rapidly expanding Aridian plants. Vines curled around control panels, leaves unfurled to interface with life support systems. "Don't fight their growth," Niara instructed, her form shimmering as she communicated with the sentient flora. "Guide it. Let them enhance our systems naturally." The engineering crew, their bodies a mix of organic and crystalline structures, worked tirelessly to adapt vacant sections into sprawling greenhouse zones. The plants surged into these new spaces, their growth becoming more controlled and purposeful. In the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zar and Cax Zorn grappled with the surge of data from the Aridian Ark. Their merged consciousness expanded, encompassing the vast network of information. The patterns are becoming clear, Zara's voice echoed through the crystal structure. We can predict the formation and movement of pocket environments within the nebula with unprecedented accuracy. Cax's energy form pulsed with excitement. This knowledge could revolutionize our exploration capabilities. We could navigate the nebula entity safely, perhaps even influence its behavior. As they worked, a new presence made itself known. Ambassador Henderson and Zilera, their merged form further altered by the intense ambrosia field, stepped into the organic computer core chamber. We've established contact with all factions aboard the hybrid structure, they spoke in unison, their voice carrying a new resonance. A diplomatic corps is being formed to manage our diverse population. In the central council chamber, a fusion of organic and technological elements from both vessels, representatives from all species gathered. The room hummed with tension and possibility. We face unprecedented challenges, a human council member began, her form shimmering with residual ambrosia energy. But we also have unparalleled opportunities. A Aridian elder, his ancient features softened by recent transformation, nodded in agreement. Our combined knowledge and technology give us a unique advantage in facing the approaching anomalies. As the council debated their next moves, Dr. Volkov burst into the chamber, her eyes bright with excitement. We've done it, she announced, holding up a vial of shimmering liquid. A stable serum derived from the ambrosia-enhancing fruit. It allows for controlled amplification of ambrosia-induced abilities. The council members murmured in surprise and anticipation. After a brief discussion, they approved limited trials among volunteer crew members, with strict monitoring protocols in place. Outside the council chamber, George and Ayera oversaw the integration of the Arkship's ancient weapon systems with the station's modern technology. Engineers worked feverishly to adapt dormant Aridian energy cannons, their surfaces now alive with pulsing ambrosia energy. These weapons draw power directly from the ambient ambrosia field, George explained, his hands moving across a holographic display. They're unlike anything we've ever wielded before. As the hybrid structure hummed with activity and preparation, long-range sensors detected the first of the approaching anomalies entering the outer reaches of the nebula entity. The main control room erupted into action as crew members scrambled to their stations. On the central view screen, a swirling mass of energy and matter appeared, its form shifting and pulsing as it interacted with the pocket environments. Ripples of transformation spread through the ambrosia-rich space, causing the nebula to shimmer with new colors and patterns. Captain Zara's voice rang out through the communication system. All hands prepare for potential impact. Anomaly trajectory indicates a possible collision course with our position in approximately 6 hours. George and Niara exchanged a look of tenacity. They knew that their unique bond and experience with ambrosia energy made them the ideal candidates to lead the first contact team. We need to assemble our team, Niara said, her form already shifting in anticipation of the encounter. We'll take a shuttle and intercept the anomaly before it reaches the station. As they moved towards the newly formed hangar bay, the hybrid structure pulsed around them, its merged crews of humans, Aridians, and transformed individuals preparing for the unknown. The air crackled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension as they stood on the brink of a potentially transformative encounter. George and Niara boarded the shuttle, their team of specially selected crew members following close behind. As the hangar bay doors slid open, revealing the swirling ambrosia field beyond, they knew that whatever lay ahead would change them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The shuttle launched into the nebula entity, its hull shimmering with protective energy as it carried its crew towards their rendezvous with the unknown cosmic entity. Behind them, the Station Arc hybrid stood ready, its newly integrated defenses primed and its inhabitants poised for whatever challenges the approaching anomaly might bring. The shuttle streaked through the nebula entity, its hull shimmering with protective energy as it carried George, Niari, and their team towards the approaching anomaly. However, as they neared their destination, the shuttle's systems began to malfunction, overwhelmed by the intense ambrosia field. "We can't get any closer," the pilot announced, her voice strained as she fought to maintain control of the vessel. "The energy levels are off the charts." George exchanged a quick glance with Nyara. "Take us back to the station," he ordered. "We'll have to make contact from there." As they returned to the Station Arc hybrid, the crew rushed to the newly constructed observation deck. The team included Dr. Volkov, Lyra, and a select group of transformed crew members with enhanced sensory abilities. They activated the prototype ambrosia manipulation devices recovered from the hidden chamber, creating a controlled energy field around the observation deck to protect against potential harmful radiation. The anomaly, now visible to the naked eye, revealed itself as a massive, pulsating orb of swirling colors and shifting matter. Its surface rippled and churned, sending waves of energy cascading through the surrounding space. "It's beautiful," Nyara breathed, her form shimmering in response to the anomaly's presence. In the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zara and Cax Zorn worked frantically to interpret the influx of new data from the organic computer core. Their merged consciousness expanded, struggling to process the overwhelming information. "This is unlike anything we've ever encountered," Zara's voice echoed through the crystal structure. "The anomaly contains traces of genetic material from thousands of different species." Cax's energy form pulsed with intensity. "It's like a living archive of countless civilizations." As the anomaly entered the outer perimeter of the station's sensor range, the Station Arc hybrid's newly integrated defense systems activated automatically. A shimmering energy barrier formed around the structure, its surface rippling with patterns of light. In the hydroponics bay, the sentient Aridian plants responded to the approaching anomaly by accelerating their growth. Vines thickened and spread rapidly, creating a dense living shield in the outer sections of the station. Engineers scrambled to reroute critical systems as the rapid expansion caused power fluctuations throughout the hybrid. The anomaly drew closer, emitting powerful electromagnetic pulses that interfered with the station's communications and sensor arrays. Static filled the communication channels, and holographic displays flickered erratically. Ambassador Henderson and Zillara, their merged form adapting to the changing conditions, moved swiftly through the station. They established a makeshift relay system, using their hybrid physiology to maintain contact between different sections of the station arc. "We need to prepare for all possibility," they spoke in unison, their voice carrying a new urgency. "Coordinate evacuation protocols with all factions." On the observation deck, Dr. Volkov monitored the physiological responses of the contact team. Her eyes widened as she observed unprecedented changes in their ambrosia-infused bodies. "Fascinating," she muttered, quickly administering a stabilizing agent to each team member. "The proximity to the anomaly is triggering accelerated evolution in your cellular structure. You're gaining heightened perception and the ability to process complex data streams directly through your nervous systems." George and Nyara stood at the forefront of the observation deck, their bodies tingling with newfound sensations. Drawing upon their connection to the ambrosia nexus, they attempted to establish communication with the anomaly. As they focused their efforts, the observation deck began to transform. The walls and floor rippled and shifted, forming intricate patterns that seemed to respond to the anomaly's pulsations. Lyra gasped, her fingers tracing the emerging patterns. "These are Aridian mathematical symbols, an ancient language long lost to our civilization." Before they could decipher the patterns, the anomaly suddenly accelerated towards the Station Arc hybrid. The impact sent tremors through the structure, straining the defensive energy barrier. Alarms blared throughout the station as emergency protocols activated, bulkheads sealed, cutting off vulnerable sections, while power rerouted to critical systems. In the central chamber, the Interspecies Council initiated crisis management procedures. Representatives from all factions worked together, coordinating response efforts across all departments. A spectacular light show erupted as the anomaly collided with the station's defenses. Brilliant tendrils of energy from the anomaly penetrated the barrier, seeking out concentrations of ambrosia energy within the hybrid structure. These tendrils made contact with the expanded network of sentient Aridian plants, triggering a cascade of rapid mutations. In the hydroponics bay, the plants began producing a new variety of ambrosia-infused fruit at an alarming rate. Glowing spores released from these fruits quickly spread throughout the station's air circulation system. Crew members exposed to the spores experienced spontaneous, temporary enhancements to their already transformed physiology. Some developed temporary telekinetic abilities, while others found themselves able to phase through solid matter. In the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zara's consciousness expanded further, detecting a pattern in the anomaly's behavior. "It's not attacking us," she announced, her voice resonating through the organic computer core. "It's trying to integrate with our structure, using the ambrosia energy as a conduit." Cax Zorn, his energy form now in flux due to the anomaly's influence, struggled to maintain the core's stability. "We need to relay this information to the contact team immediately," he urged. On the observation deck, George and Nyara received the critical information. They exchanged a determined look, recognizing the potential danger of complete integration. "We need to guide this process," George said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we let it merge unchecked, we could lose control entirely." Nyara nodded, her form shimmering with almost unchecked energy. "The prototype devices. We can use them to create a controlled feedback loop." Without hesitation, they activated the ambrosia manipulation devices, channeling massive amounts of energy through their bodies. The strain was immediate and intense, their physical forms trembling under the pressure. As the merging process intensified, previously dormant systems throughout the station arc hybrid sprang to life. Ancient Aridian technology interfaced with the anomaly's vast stores of genetic information, initiating a station-wide transformation. Corridors reshaped themselves, forming new chambers designed to house and study the myriad life forms encoded within the anomaly structure. The boundaries between the station, its inhabitants, and the cosmic anomaly blurred as the metamorphosis accelerated. George and Nyara stood at the heart of the transformation, their bodies serving as conduits for the merging energies. The observation deck around them pulsed with light, the patterns on the walls shifting faster than the eye could follow. "We're losing cohesion," Nyara gasped, her form flickering between solid and energy states. "The integration is happening too quickly." George gritted his teeth, pushing his abilities to their limit. "We can't let go now. We need to maintain control, guide the process." As the station arc hybrid entered a critical phase of metamorphosis, the crew scrambled to adapt to their rapidly changing environment. The once familiar corridors and chambers warped and shifted, creating a new hybrid entity that defied easy categorization. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Volkov worked feverishly to stabilize the affected crew members, while Lyra attempted to decipher the evolving Aridian symbols that now covered every surface. The stage was set for further transformations and discoveries as the hybrid entity evolved into something entirely new. The station arc hybrid, now merged with the cosmic anomaly, pulsed with potential, poised to reshape their understanding of life in the ambrosia-rich cosmos. Universe in ways yet unknown. The observation deck, once a bastion of controlled observation, now pulsed with raw energy as George and Nyara stood at its center, their bodies straining under the immense pressure of guiding the integration process. George's skin began to shimmer, taking on a metallic sheen that rippled with each surge of energy. Nyara's form became increasingly fluid, her outline blurring as she adapted to the rapidly changing environment around them. The prototype devices in their hands glowed white-hot, barely containing the massive influx of power. "We're approaching critical mass," George gasped, his voice resonating with a metallic timbre. "The strain it's changing us." Nyara's response came as a thought rather than spoken words, her physical form no longer capable of traditional speech. "We must endure. The fate of everyone on this station depends on us." As they fought to maintain control, the station arc hybrid underwent a dramatic metamorphosis. Walls melted and reformed, creating new chambers and passageways that incorporated elements from the anomaly's vast genetic library. Each newly formed area resembled a distinct alien ecosystem, perfectly adapted to house and study different life forms encoded within the anomaly structure. Dr. Volkov and her team raced through the shifting corridors, setting up containment fields and monitoring equipment. In one chamber, they discovered a group of stasis pods, each containing a dormant alien species preserved within the anomaly's genetic matrix. Fascinating, Dr. Volkov muttered, her eyes wide with excitement and apprehension. We need to establish a quarantine protocol immediately. There's no telling what kind of pathogens these beings might carry. As her team worked to secure the area, the hydroponics bay underwent its own startling transformation. The sentient Aridian plants, infused with genetic material from the anomaly, exploded into a dense, otherworldly jungle. Massive vines with iridescent leaves snaked across the walls, while flowers of impossible colors bloomed and released spores that sparkled in the air. Lyra, who had been studying the evolving Aridian symbols, found herself in the midst of this botanical chaos. She watched in awe as a fruit-bearing plant sprouted before her eyes, its fruit pulsing with an inner light. "We need a dedicated xenobotany team," she calmed to the science division. "The potential applications of these new plant species are limitless." In the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zara's partially crystallized form destabilized as the organic computer core integrated with the anomaly's vast data stores. Her consciousness expanded rapidly, threatening to fragment under the influx of information. Kaxorn's energy form pulsed with urgency. "Zara, focus on my voice. I'm creating a stabilizing field around you." He channeled his energy manipulation abilities, forming a cocoon of pulsating light around Zara's fluctuating form. Slowly, the chaotic swirl of data began to coalesce into coherent streams of information. "The knowledge?" Zara's voice echoed through the crystal structure. "It's overwhelming. Histories of countless civilizations, technologies beyond our comprehension. We need to—" Her words were cut short as a surge of energy rippled through the station, causing the very fabric of reality to warp around them. In the central chamber, the Interspecies Council found themselves face to face with newly materialized representatives from the awakened alien species. Ambassador Henderson and Zalera, their merged form adapting to the rapidly changing conditions, stepped forward to greet the newcomers. One alien, a towering being with translucent skin that revealed swirling galaxies within, spoke in a language of light and color. "We need a universal translation matrix," Zilara said urgently. "Their method of communication is unlike anything we've encountered." Before they could establish a proper dialogue, the station's enhanced defensive systems blared a warning. A fleet of ships from various species approached the edge of the nebula, drawn by the massive energy signature of the station anomaly merger. In the observation deck, George and Niara sensed the approaching vessels. Their bodies, now barely recognizable as humanoid, had become living conduits for the combined power of the station, the anomaly, and the nebula entity. "We can shape this," George realized, his thoughts merging with Niara's. "We can guide the final form of the hybrid structure." With a concentrated effort, they began to direct the flow of energy. The entire station shuddered and shifted, corridors and chambers rearranging themselves into a more cohesive layout. The sentient Iridian plants responded to their will, forming a living network that connected all areas of the station. As the transformation reached its peak, a massive burst of energy emanated from the core of the station anomaly hybrid. The pulse traveled through the nebula, altering the pocket environments and creating new, stable zones suitable for exploration and habitation. The approaching fleet, caught in the wave of energy, found their engines temporarily disabled. The ships drifted closer to the station, their crews witnessing the final stages of the incredible metamorphosis. Inside the station, crew members experienced another wave of mutations. Engineers working on power integration suddenly found themselves able to manipulate energy fields with their bare hands. Medical staff developed enhanced healing abilities, their touch alone capable of mending wounds. As the energy pulse subsided, the station anomaly hybrid achieved a new equilibrium. George and Niara, their bodies permanently altered by the experience, slowly regained individual awareness. They looked at each other, marveling at their new forms and the expanded senses they now possessed. "We did it," Niara communicated, her thoughts easily reaching George's mind. "But this is just the beginning." George nodded, his metallic skin reflecting the ambient light of their transformed surroundings. "We've created something entirely new, a bridge between countless worlds and species." As they began to explore their expanded abilities in connection to the structure, the rest of the crew, along with the newly awakened alien species, started to adapt to their transformed home. The approaching fleet drew nearer, their disabled ships now visible through the station's enhanced sensors. Ambassador Henderson's voice came through the communal link, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his tone. Prepare for first contact protocols. We're about to have visitors. The station anomaly hybrid, a testament to the power of cooperation and adaptation, stood poised at the threshold of a new era. As its inhabitants prepared to face the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same. The universe would never be the same indeed. As the energy pulse subsided, the station anomaly hybrid settled into its new form, a testament to the incredible transformation it had undergone. George and Niara, still at the heart of the observation deck, felt their altered bodies gradually solidify into more recognizable shapes. George marveled at his metallic skin, which gleamed and rippled with each movement, reflecting the ambient light of their surroundings. Niara's form retained a fluid-like quality, her outline shimmering as she adapted to the transformed environment. "This is extraordinary," George said, his voice resonating with a metallic timbre. He raised his hand, watching as the nearby wall responded to his thoughts, reshaping itself into an intricate pattern. Niara nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "We've become one with the station. Can you feel it? The entire structure, it's alive." As they began to explore their newfound abilities, the rest of the crew scrambled to adapt to their rapidly changing home. In the newly formed habitats, Dr. Volkov and her team worked tirelessly to establish a quarantine zone for the revived alien species from the anomaly's genetic library. "Careful with that specimen," Dr. Volkov instructed, her voice tense as she observed a gelatinous being pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. "We don't know how it will react to prolonged exposure to the ambrosia-rich environment." In the hydroponics bay, now a dense otherworldly jungle, the xenobotany division led by transformed human and Aridian scientists cataloged the explosion of new plant species. Lyra, her eyes gleaming with excitement, reached out to touch a vibrant, spiral-shaped fruit. "Incredible," she breathed as her hand passed through the solid matter of the fruit's skin. "These plants, they're granting temporary abilities to those who consume them." Meanwhile, in the crystalline desert environment, Captain Zara's consciousness expanded once more, this time with greater control. She interfaced with the organic computer core, analyzing the approaching fleet of ships that had been drawn in by the energy pulse. "Ambassador Henderson," she communicated through the station's newly integrated systems, "I've identified vessels from various known species, as well as several of unknown origin. They're entering our immediate vicinity." In response, the Interspecies Council activated the station's enhanced defense protocols. A shimmering containment field materialized around the incoming vessels, allowing for controlled docking procedures while preventing any potential hostile actions. Ambassador Henderson and Zilera, their merged form now stable, made their way to the newly created Grand Reception Area. George and Niara had reshaped a section of the station into a massive open chamber capable of accommodating beings of various sizes and environmental needs. Sentient Aridian plants formed living structures that served as universal translation devices, their leaves pulsing with soft light. As the first ships docked with the station, a diverse array of beings began to disembark. Ambassador Henderson stepped forward to greet them, his voice calm and welcoming despite the extraordinary circumstances. "On behalf of the station anomaly hybrid and its inhabitants, I bid you welcome," he announced, his words seamlessly translated by the living structures around them. Among the newcomers, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin approached. "I am Captain Alara of the Quantum Syndicate," she introduced herself, her voice a melodic hum. "We've been searching for a merger of technology and cosmic phenomena like this for centuries. It's beyond our wildest expectations." As the cultural exchange began, Dr. Volkov's team made a breakthrough in understanding the effects of long-term ambrosia exposure. In one of the newly revealed chambers within the original Aridian Arc section, They discovered advanced technology that allowed them to develop a treatment to control and stabilize transformations. This could change everything, Dr. Volkov said, her eyes alight with excitement as she administered the treatment to a volunteer whose body had been in constant flux. We can harness the benefits of ambrosia energy while mitigating its risks. The news of this development spread quickly through the station, met with both relief and excitement among its inhabitants. However, their celebration was short-lived as a new challenge emerged. In the heart of the organic computer core, Captain Zara's consciousness detected an approaching wave of cosmic radiation, more intense than any previously encountered. Her voice, tinged with urgency, echoed through the station's communication systems. All personnel, this is Captain Zara. We've detected an incoming radiation wave that threatens to disrupt our delicate balance. We need all available resources and expertise to address this immediately. George and Nyara exchanged a determined look, their transformed bodies humming with energy. They could feel the impending danger through their connection to the station's structure. We need to create a protective barrier, George said, his metallic skin gleaming as he interfaced with the station's systems. Nyara nodded, her fluid form rippling with concentration. We'll need to combine the station's advanced technology with our ability to manipulate the structure. As they began formulating a plan, working in tandem with Captain Zara, Cax Zorn, and the engineering team, the station anomaly hybrid buzzed with activity. The diverse inhabitants, from longtime crew members to newly arrived species, united in their efforts to face this new crisis. The radiation wave loomed on the horizon, a shimmering curtain of deadly energy visible through the station's enhanced sensors. Time was running short, and the fate of this unprecedented cosmic experiment hung in the balance. George and Nyara, their bond strengthened by their shared transformation, stood at the forefront of the station's defenses, ready to lead its inhabitants into the unknown. Next challenge that threatened their very existence. The cosmic radiation wave loomed on the horizon, a shimmering curtain of deadly energy visible through the station's enhanced sensors. George and Nyara exchanged a determined look, their transformed bodies humming with energy. We need to act fast, George said, his metallic skin gleaming as he interfaced with the station's systems. Nyara nodded, her fluid form rippling with concentration. Let's reshape the outer layers. We can create interlocking energy fields to deflect the radiation. As they began to implement their plan, Captain Zara's voice echoed through the station's communication network. All personnel prepare for emergency protocols. Engineering team, report to the central hub immediately. Lyra, leading the engineering team, arrived at the hub, her eyes wide with commitment. We can integrate the Aridian terraforming devices into the new structure, she suggested, her hands already moving across the control panels. It should enhance our protective capabilities. While George and Nyara focused on reshaping the station's outer layers, Dr. Volkov hurried through the corridors, administering her newly developed stabilization treatment to key personnel. This will allow you to push your transformations further without risk, she explained as she injected the silvery liquid into a crew member's arm. Captain Zara, her body now a perfect fusion of crystalline flesh, interfaced directly with the organic computer core. Her consciousness expanded, becoming one with the station's defense systems. Radiation wave approaching, she announced, her voice resonating through the structure. Impact in 3 minutes. The station anomaly hybrid trembled as George and Nyara channeled their energy into the protective barriers. The outer layers of the station shifted and reformed, creating a complex network of interlocking energy fields. Lyra and her team worked feverishly to integrate the Aridian technology, their fingers flying across control panels as they fine-tuned the defenses. Brace for impact. Captain Zara's warning rang out just as the first tendrils of the radiation wave touched the station's outer barriers. The hybrid structure shuddered under the onslaught, its newly formed protective fields straining against the cosmic onslaught. For a moment, it seemed as though their efforts might not be enough. Then slowly but surely, the barriers held. However, the danger was not nearly finished. As the radiation continued to batter the station, some of the energy began to seep through the defenses, causing unpredictable reactions throughout the structure. In the hydroponics bay, the mutated Aridian plant started to evolve rapidly. Lyra gasped as she watched a spiral-shaped fruit suddenly burst open, releasing a cloud of glowing spores. "The plants," she called out over the comm system, "they're producing new forms of ambrosia-infused fruit at an alarming rate." George and Nyara, their bodies serving as conduits for the station's energy, sensed the changes rippling through the hybrid structure. "We can use this," George realized, his thoughts merging seamlessly with Nyara's. "We can channel the incoming radiation to further evolve the station." Nyara nodded, her fluid form pulsing with newfound purpose. "If we guide the energy correctly, we can transform the entire structure into something even more extraordinary." Together, they began the delicate process of channeling the cosmic energy, directing it through the station's systems and into the diverse habitats. As they worked, the boundaries between organic and inorganic matter began to blur. Corridors transformed into living tissue, pulsing with energy. Metallic surfaces took on a soft, almost flesh-like quality. In the central chamber, Ambassador Henderson watched in awe as his hand seemed to merge with the crystalline console before him. "What's happening to us?" a voice cried out, tinged with both fear and wonder. Zalara, her hybrid form adapting quickly to the changes, stepped forward to address the gathered representatives from the docked ships. "We are evolving," she explained, her voice calm and reassuring. "Embrace the transformation. Allow yourselves to become one with the station." As the metamorphosis accelerated, Captain Ilara of the Quantum Syndicate approached Ambassador Henderson, her iridescent skin shimmering with excitement. "Ambassador," she said, her voice humming with energy, "I believe I can help. Our ship's quantum drives. If we link them with the station's systems, we could create a bridge between dimensions." Henderson's eyes widened at the implications. "You mean?" "We could exist simultaneously in multiple realities," Ilara confirmed. "It might be our best chance of surviving this transformation." Without hesitation, Henderson nodded his approval. As Ilara's crew worked to establish the quantum link, the radiation wave reached its peak intensity. George and Nyara, their consciousness expanded beyond the limits of their physical forms, guided the final stages of the transformation. They shaped the evolving entity into a cosmic nexus, a place where beings from across the universe could come together. The station anomaly hybrid expanded beyond its physical boundaries, becoming a living, breathing entity that spanned across dimensions. As the last of the radiation wave passed, the newly transformed structure settled into its new form, a shimmering, multi-dimensional construct that defied conventional understanding. The inhabitants of the station, their bodies and minds forever changed, began to explore their new existence. Dr. Volkov and her team established a medical bay that existed across multiple dimensions, while the Xenobotany division marveled at plants that grew in non-physical realms. Captain Zara and Caxa Zorn, fully integrated with the organic computer core, became the guiding intelligence of the station's defense systems. Their consciousness expanded across multiple universes, creating a network of quantum-entangled sensors. As the inhabitants adjusted to their new reality, Lyra and her engineering team worked on developing new forms of propulsion. "We can navigate through the cosmos and between dimensions at will," she explained, her eyes gleaming with excitement. George and Nyara, their consciousness now spanning the vastness of the multidimensional entity, embraced their role as its heart and guide. They looked out across the infinite expanse of existence, ready to lead their fellow inhabitants into a future filled with endless possibilities. The former station anomaly hybrid, now a living, multidimensional nexus, pulsed with energy and potential. As its diverse inhabitants prepared for their first journey into the unknown, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The cosmos, in all its infinite wonder, awaited their exploration.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.